It started as an ordinary Thursday morning, the kind of morning most people would forget before lunch. The coffee machine hummed softly in the corner of the kitchen. Sunlight filtered through the large windows of the penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago. On the dining table sat a half-finished cup of coffee, a tablet displaying stock market reports, and a newspaper with a smiling photograph of billionaire entrepreneur Nathan Carter on the front page. Everything looked perfect. At least, that's what everyone believed. Nathan adjusted his tie while scrolling through congratulatory messages on his phone. Another business award, another magazine feature, another reminder that he had become the man he always dreamed of being. Across the room, his new wife, Olivia Carter, was discussing plans for an upcoming charity gala. "The mayor is expected to attend," she said, "and a few national reporters." Nathan barely looked up. Good. More publicity never hurts. Olivia smiled. Neither of them noticed the irony in those words, because before the night was over, publicity would become the last thing Nathan wanted. Across the city, Ava Mitchell stood inside a small community center, helping a little girl tie her shoes. "Perfect," Ava said with a warm smile. The child grinned. To anyone watching, Ava looked like an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, no social media followers documenting her every move. Just a woman, quietly making a difference in the lives of people around her. And yet, unknown to almost everyone, including Nathan himself, Ava carried a secret connected to the very foundation of his billion-dollar empire. A truth buried for years. A truth no amount of money could hide forever. A truth that would soon leave Nathan standing in a crowded room, wishing he could take back every cruel word he had ever spoken. But on that Thursday morning, he had no idea. He thought he had won. He thought the divorce had proven he was better off without Ava. He thought his success story belonged entirely to him. Most dangerous of all, he thought the past could never catch up with him. Have you ever looked back at someone and wondered how you failed to see their value when they were right in front of you? Have you ever been so focused on what you wanted that you overlooked the person helping you get there? Because that's exactly what happened to Nathan Carter. And by the time he learned the truth, the damage had already been done. Tonight's story is about success, pride, love, regret, and a lesson many people learn too late. The people standing quietly beside you today may be the very reason you're standing at all. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, have you ever realized someone's worth only after they were gone? And if you enjoy powerful love stories filled with real-life lessons, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now, let's begin with the night everything started to fall apart. The night Nathan Carter walked into a charity gala believing he was the most successful man in the room, and walked out discovering he might have been the biggest fool. The Grand Regency Hotel was already buzzing when Nathan Carter arrived. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Camera flashes lit up the evening. Politicians, celebrities, athletes, and business leaders gathered beneath crystal chandeliers for one of Chicago's largest charity events of the year. Nathan stepped out of his black sedan with the confidence of a man who had spent years becoming exactly who he wanted to be. Or so he believed. "Nathan! Over here!" Several reporters immediately called his name. He smiled automatically. The smile had become second nature over the years. It appeared in magazine covers, business interviews, television appearances, social media posts. People loved stories about success, and Nathan Carter was one of the biggest success stories in America. At 43 years old, he owned one of the country's fastest-growing technology companies. His net worth had crossed the billion-dollar mark 2 years earlier. Financial magazines called him visionary. Business schools studied his leadership style. Young entrepreneurs quoted his speeches. To the world, Nathan Carter represented what happened when ambition met opportunity. What most people didn't know was that Nathan had started believing his own headlines. As he climbed the hotel steps, Olivia gracefully joined him. Her elegant silver gown attracted almost as much attention as Nathan himself. The cameras loved them together. They looked perfect, successful, beautiful, powerful. The kind of couple people assumed had everything. "You ready?" Olivia asked. Nathan smiled. "Always." Inside the ballroom, conversations paused as guests noticed their arrival. Several people approached immediately. Handshakes, compliments, networking. The routine never changed. Nathan moved through the crowd effortlessly. Everywhere he went, people wanted a moment of his attention. Everywhere he went, people reminded him how successful he had become. And with every compliment, his confidence grew. The event organizers eventually directed guests toward the cocktail reception area before dinner. Nathan accepted a glass of sparkling water and continued greeting familiar faces. Then, something unexpected happened. Across the room, he saw someone he hadn't expected to see. Someone he hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. Ava Mitchell. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. She stood near one of the charity displays speaking with an elderly couple. She wore a simple navy blue dress. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive, no designer labels, no attempt to compete with the glamorous crowd surrounding her. Yet somehow, she looked completely comfortable, completely at peace. Nathan frowned slightly. That wasn't what he expected. After their divorce, he had imagined many versions of Ava's future. Lonely, regretful, struggling, maybe even bitter. But peaceful? That possibility had never crossed his mind. The elderly couple laughed at something Ava said. Nathan watched her smile. The same smile that had once greeted him every morning. The same smile he had gradually stopped noticing during their marriage. Olivia followed his gaze. Is that your ex-wife? Nathan looked away. Yeah. Olivia studied Ava for a moment. She seems nice. Nathan shrugged. She's fine. But something about the encounter already made him uncomfortable. Not because Ava looked unhappy, because she didn't. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that bothered him. The evening continued. Guests moved between tables. Music played softly. Waiters circulated through the ballroom carrying trays of appetizers. Nathan tried focusing on conversations around him. Yet every so often, his eyes drifted back toward Ava. Each time, she appeared engaged in meaningful conversations. Each time, she seemed genuinely content. There was no sign of jealousy. No sign of resentment. No sign that seeing Nathan and Olivia together affected her at all. That realization irritated him more than it should have. Finally, fate intervened. Near the silent auction display, their paths crossed. Ava noticed him first. Her expression remained calm. Hello, Nathan. Her voice was polite. Nothing more, nothing less. Hi, Ava. For a second, neither spoke. Olivia stepped forward with a friendly smile. It's nice to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you. Ava smiled. Only good things, I hope. Olivia laughed softly. Nathan forced a smile. Depends on who you're asking. The comment earned a few chuckles from nearby guests. Ava simply nodded. Then she glanced toward Olivia. You two seem happy. We are, Nathan answered quickly. Too quickly. Olivia squeezed his arm. We've been very fortunate. Ava nodded again. That's good. There was no bitterness in her voice. No disappointment. No sadness. Just sincerity. And somehow, that frustrated Nathan. He wanted a reaction. Any reaction. Something that would prove she still cared. Instead, she remained calm. Confident. Unaffected. Nathan heard himself speak before fully thinking. How have things been for you? Good. Still working at the community center? Yes. Nathan nodded slowly. That's nice. The words sounded harmless, but his tone carried something else. A subtle condescension. The implication that her life was small compared to his. Several people nearby noticed. Ava noticed too. But instead of becoming defensive, she simply smiled. I enjoy it. Nathan glanced around the luxurious ballroom. I suppose success means different things to different people. The statement landed exactly as intended. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Olivia's smile faded slightly. Ava looked directly at him. For the first time all evening, silence settled between them. Nathan expected anger, embarrassment, a sharp response. Instead, Ava said something simple. Yes. Then she added quietly, it does. Her calmness robbed Nathan's comment of its power. Suddenly, he felt foolish, as if he had thrown a punch and somehow hit himself instead. Before anyone could speak again, a distinguished older man approached the group. His name was Richard Bennett, one of the earliest investors in Nathan's company. A man respected throughout the business world. Richard greeted Ava warmly. Ava, it's wonderful to see you. You too, Richard. The older man smiled. Then his eyes shifted toward Nathan. And something changed. Just for a second. A strange expression crossed his face. Disappointment, disapproval, maybe even pity. Nathan couldn't quite identify it. But he noticed it immediately. Richard looked back toward Ava. I've been hoping we'd have a chance to talk tonight. I'd like that. Good. Then Richard glanced once more toward Nathan. This time, the look lasted longer. Far longer. Long enough to make Nathan uncomfortable. Long enough to plant the first seed of doubt. Because Richard Bennett knew things. Things about the company's early years. Things most people had forgotten. Things Nathan himself rarely thought about anymore. And judging by the expression on Richard's face, there was a reason he looked disturbed. A reason connected to Ava. A reason connected to the empire Nathan proudly claimed as his own. A reason that would soon change everything. But Nathan didn't know that yet. At that moment, he still believed he controlled the story. He still believed the past belonged behind him. And he still believed the woman standing across from him was simply an ex-wife he had outgrown. He couldn't have been more wrong. Nathan remained standing near the silent auction display long after Ava and Richard Bennett walked away. The conversation around him continued. Laughter echoed through the ballroom. Glasses clinked. Music played softly. Yet, Nathan found himself distracted. He wasn't thinking about business. He wasn't thinking about the charity event. He wasn't even thinking about Olivia. His mind remained fixed on one thing. Ava. More specifically, the way she had looked at him. There had been no anger, no resentment, no sadness, nothing. And somehow, that unsettled him more than any confrontation ever could. "You okay?" Olivia's voice pulled him back to the present. Nathan forced a smile. "Of course. You seem distracted." "I'm fine." Olivia studied him carefully. Years of attending business functions had taught her how to read people. She knew when someone was hiding something. Tonight, Nathan was definitely hiding something. Unfortunately, she assumed it was concern about seeing his ex-wife again. She didn't realize it was something deeper, something Nathan himself didn't yet understand. Across the ballroom, Ava continued speaking with guests. Several people approached her throughout the evening. Many seemed genuinely happy to see her, Nathan noticed, and each observation only deepened his confusion. Why did so many people seem to respect her? During their marriage, he had rarely paid attention to her relationships outside their home. Back then, he had been too focused on growing his company, too focused on meetings, too focused on becoming successful. Maybe that was why tonight felt strange. For the first time in years, he was seeing Ava through other people's eyes. And what he saw didn't match the version of her he had created in his mind, the version he had carried since the divorce, the version that made leaving easier, the version that convinced him she had held him back. The evening continued. Dinner was eventually served. Nathan sat beside Olivia at the head table. The charity organizers gave speeches. Awards were presented. Donations were announced. Everything unfolded exactly as planned. Yet Nathan's attention drifted repeatedly. Every time he looked toward Ava, he found her listening attentively to whoever was speaking. She seemed completely comfortable, completely present, completely unaffected by his presence. That bothered him. Not because he wanted her back. At least, that's what he told himself. It bothered him because her peace challenged the story he had spent years believing. If she was truly happy, then perhaps their divorce hadn't affected only her. Perhaps it had affected him too. The thought irritated him. Nathan quickly pushed it away. After dinner, guests began moving toward the ballroom terrace overlooking the city skyline. The cool evening air provided relief from the crowded room. Nathan stepped outside alone. Below him, Chicago's lights stretched endlessly into the distance. 2 years ago, moments like this made him feel proud. Tonight, they felt strangely empty. "You look troubled." Nathan turned. Richard Bennett stood nearby. The older investor held a glass of water. His expression was calm, but his eyes were unusually serious. Nathan offered a polite smile. "Just tired." Richard chuckled. "No, you're many things, Nathan. Tired isn't one of them." Nathan remained silent. Richard stepped closer. "I saw your conversation with Ava." Nathan shrugged. "It wasn't much of a conversation." "No." Richard nodded. "That's exactly the problem." Nathan frowned. "What does that mean?" Richard looked toward the city lights. For several seconds, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Nathan hadn't expected. "Success has a strange way of rewriting memories." Nathan crossed his arms. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Maybe not." Richard looked at him carefully. "But someday, you will." Before Nathan could respond, Richard excused himself and walked away. The conversation lasted less than a minute, yet it stayed with Nathan for the rest of the night. Success has a strange way of rewriting memories. What did that even mean? Around midnight, the gala finally ended. Nathan and Olivia returned home. The city was quiet during the drive. Streetlights flashed past the windows. Olivia scrolled through photos from the event. Nathan stared outside, lost in thought. "You know," Olivia finally said, "I actually liked Ava." Nathan glanced at her. "What?" "She seems genuine." Nathan looked away. "Maybe." Olivia laughed softly. "That's not exactly a glowing endorsement." Nathan didn't answer. Several minutes passed. Then Olivia spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you make that comment about success?" Nathan immediately knew which comment she meant. Success means different things to different people. At the time, the remark had felt harmless. Now, it sounded different. Smaller. Petty. "I was just making conversation." "No." Olivia shook her head. "You were trying to prove something." Nathan stared through the windshield. For the first time that evening, he had no response. Because deep down, he knew she was right. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When they arrived home, Olivia went upstairs. Nathan remained in the kitchen, unable to sleep. The penthouse was quiet, almost too quiet. He poured himself a glass of water, then another. Yet, the restlessness remained. Eventually, he found himself opening an old storage cabinet. Inside were boxes containing items he hadn't touched since the divorce. Photographs, documents, old notebooks, random pieces of a life that no longer existed. Nathan hadn't looked through them in years. Tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, he pulled out one of the boxes. Inside were photographs from the early years. Years before private jets. Years before luxury penthouses. Years before magazine covers. Back when success had been little more than a dream. Back when he and Ava shared a tiny apartment. Nathan picked up one photograph. The memory returned instantly. A small kitchen. Second-hand furniture. A broken refrigerator they couldn't afford to replace. Ava standing beside him, holding a birthday cake she had baked herself. They looked happy. Not wealthy. Not successful. Happy. Nathan stared at the photograph longer than he intended. Another image followed. Then another, and another. Each photograph revealed something he had forgotten. Or perhaps, chosen to forget. The woman in those pictures looked exhausted sometimes. But she was always smiling. Always encouraging him. Always standing beside him. A strange feeling settled over him. Guilt. The next photograph hit hardest of all. It showed Ava sitting beside him at a hospital. Nathan remembered the night immediately. His father had suffered a serious medical emergency. Nathan had been overwhelmed, terrified, unable to think clearly. Ava had stayed awake for nearly 36 hours straight, handling paperwork, speaking with doctors, calling relatives, making sure Nathan could focus on his family. Back then, he had thanked her, but only briefly. Then, life moved on. The memory made his chest tighten. How many moments like that had he forgotten? How many sacrifices had become invisible over time? Nathan set the photograph down. For the first time in years, he began questioning his own version of history. The divorce had always seemed simple in his mind. Two people growing apart. Two different paths. Nothing more. But tonight, the story felt incomplete. As if important chapters were missing. As if he had only been remembering the parts that benefited him. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Nathan finally returned the photographs to the box. Yet sleep still refused to come. He walked toward the massive living room windows overlooking the city. Thousands of lights sparkled below. Evidence of millions of lives unfolding simultaneously. Somewhere among those lights was Ava, probably sleeping peacefully, probably unaware that she had become the center of his thoughts. Nathan stared into the darkness. One question refused to leave him alone. Why did she seem happier now than she had during their marriage? The answer frightened him, because if Ava had found peace after leaving him, then perhaps he wasn't the hero of their story. Perhaps he was the reason she needed peace in the first place. And for a man who had spent years believing he was always right, that possibility was difficult to accept. Very difficult. But the truth had already begun knocking at the door. Nathan simply wasn't ready to open it yet. Before we continue to chapter 2, let's talk about something important. Have you ever looked back on a relationship and realized that someone was doing far more for you than you ever noticed at the time? Nathan spent years focusing on what Ava wasn't giving him, while completely overlooking everything she had already sacrificed for him. Sometimes, the people who love us the most don't ask for recognition, and that's exactly why we take them for granted. Tell me in the comments, do you think Nathan truly loved Ava, or did he only start appreciating her after she was gone? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story filled with love, life lessons, and unforgettable moments. Now let's continue, because in chapter 2 we're about to discover the sacrifices Ava made behind the scenes, and why the truth about Nathan's success is much bigger than anyone realizes. Long before the penthouse, long before the interviews, long before the billion-dollar company, there was a small apartment above a laundromat on the south side of Chicago. The apartment wasn't much to look at. The floors creaked. The heating system worked only when it felt like it. The kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people. But years earlier, Nathan and Ava had considered it a temporary stop on the road to something bigger. Back then, they were newly married. Back then, they were partners. At least, that's what Ava believed. The alarm clock rang at 5:30 every morning. Ava was always the first one awake. Every day, without fail. She would quietly slip out of bed, careful not to disturb Nathan. Then, she would begin her routine. Coffee, breakfast, lunch preparation, laundry, bills, planning. 1,000 small responsibilities that nobody noticed because she handled them before anyone else woke up, including Nathan. On most mornings, Nathan would stumble into the kitchen around 7, half awake, already thinking about work, already thinking about investors, already thinking about building the company he dreamed would someday change his life. Ava would place breakfast in front of him. "Big meeting today?" Nathan nodded while checking emails. "Very big. You'll do great. Hopefully." "You always say that." Nathan smiled. "And I'm usually right." Ava laughed. "You definitely are." Moments like that seemed insignificant at the time. Ordinary. Forgettable. Yet years later, Nathan would struggle to remember who had been encouraging him every single day before anyone else believed in him. Because success has a strange way of making people focus on the destination while forgetting who helped them survive the journey. One rainy Tuesday morning, Nathan walked into the kitchen looking defeated. Ava immediately noticed. "What happened?" Nathan dropped heavily into a chair. "The investor backed out." Ava frowned. "The one from Milwaukee?" Nathan nodded. 3 months of meetings wasted. Silence filled the room. Nathan stared at the floor. For weeks he had convinced himself the investment would save the company. Without it, everything suddenly felt uncertain again. "What are you going to do?" Nathan rubbed his face. "I don't know." The words came out quietly, almost defeated. Ava reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then we'll figure it out." Nathan looked up. "We?" "Of course we." The answer came so naturally, she didn't even think about it. Nathan managed a small smile. At that moment, her confidence became his. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Unfortunately, it was also one of the many moments he would eventually forget. A few weeks later, another challenge arrived. The company account was nearly empty. Payroll deadlines were approaching. Several employees depended on Nathan. The stress became overwhelming. For days he barely slept. Ava watched him pace through the apartment at night. She watched him stare at spreadsheets. She watched him carry the weight of everyone's future on his shoulders. One evening, she quietly opened a drawer in their bedroom. Inside sat an envelope containing money she had been saving. Money intended for graduate school. Money she had spent years putting aside. The next morning, she placed the envelope beside Nathan's coffee. He looked confused. "What's this?" "Open it." Nathan did. His eyes widened. "Ava? Use it." "No." "Yes. This is your school fund. We need the company to survive." Nathan stared at her. "I can't take this." Ava smiled softly. "You're not taking it." "What do you mean?" "I'm investing in our future." The words stayed with him for a moment. Then reality pulled him back toward work. The crisis, the deadlines, the pressure. He accepted the money. The company survived another month. Years later, people would describe Nathan's persistence during those difficult times. Few would know about the woman who quietly gave up her dream to help keep the lights on. A sacrifice hidden so completely that eventually even Nathan stopped thinking about it. As the company slowly grew, Ava's responsibilities grew too. Nathan's schedule became increasingly demanding. Longer hours, more travel, more meetings, more opportunities. Someone had to manage everything else. That someone was always Ava. She paid bills, scheduled appointments, handled household problems, managed family obligations, remembered birthdays, bought gifts, organized holidays, solved emergencies. She became the invisible system holding their lives together. The strange thing about invisible support is that people often don't notice it until it's gone. One winter afternoon, Nathan received an important call. A potential client wanted a last-minute presentation. The meeting could determine the future of the company. There was only one problem. Nathan's mother had been admitted to the hospital that morning. Nathan looked torn. The meeting and hospital visit overlapped. Both mattered. Both felt unavoidable. Ava listened quietly. Then she made a decision. Go to the meeting. Nathan hesitated. What about Mom? I'll stay with her. Are you sure? Absolutely. For the next 12 hours, Ava remained at the hospital. She spoke with doctors. She updated family members. She handled paperwork. She comforted Nathan's frightened mother. Meanwhile, Nathan attended the meeting that eventually secured one of the largest contracts in company history. That contract later became a cornerstone of his success. People celebrated Nathan's business achievement for years. Nobody celebrated Ava's role, including Nathan. Not because he was cruel, not because he intended to be selfish, because human beings often become accustomed to reliability. The more dependable someone becomes, the more we expect their support without questioning the cost. And Ava was incredibly dependable, perhaps too dependable. As the years passed, Nathan's confidence expanded alongside the company. Investors began returning his calls. Media outlets started noticing him. Employees increased. Revenue climbed. For the first time, success felt real. One evening, he returned home carrying a bottle of champagne. Ava immediately knew something good had happened. "What is it?" Nathan grinned. "We landed the Phoenix account." Ava's eyes widened. "The Phoenix account?" Nathan nodded excitedly. "It's huge." Without thinking, Ava threw her arms around him. "I'm so proud of you." For several seconds they stood there laughing, celebrating, dreaming about the future. Neither of them knew how much their lives would eventually change. Neither of them knew that success was about to test their relationship in ways failure never had. Because failure had forced them to work together. Success would slowly pull them apart. And the distance would begin so gradually that neither noticed it happening. Not yet. But the first cracks had already started forming. Tiny cracks. Invisible cracks. The kind that seem harmless until one day the entire foundation begins to shift. For a while, success felt exciting. Every milestone brought new possibilities. Every achievement felt like proof that the sacrifices had been worth it. Nathan's company moved from a cramped office to a professional workspace downtown. His employee count doubled, then doubled again. Investors who once ignored him now requested meetings. The future looked brighter than ever. And Ava was genuinely happy for him. Whenever someone praised Nathan, she felt proud. Whenever the company grew, she celebrated. Whenever another opportunity appeared, she encouraged him to chase it. She believed their hard work was finally paying off. What she didn't realize was that while Nathan's world was expanding, hers was quietly shrinking. It happened so gradually that neither of them noticed at first. Nathan's business required more attention, more travel, more networking, more late nights. And every time a new responsibility appeared, Ava adjusted her own life to accommodate it. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table, reviewing information from a local university, graduate school. The dream she had postponed years earlier. The dream she still hoped to pursue someday. A community development program. Something she felt passionate about. Something she had wanted long before Nathan started his company. She smiled while reading through the materials. For the first time in years it felt possible. Nathan arrived home shortly afterward, exhausted, distracted, talking on his phone. He barely noticed the brochures on the table. "Yeah," he said into the phone. "Move the meeting to Thursday." Ava waited patiently. After he ended the call, she slid the paperwork toward him. "Can I show you something?" Nathan glanced down. "What is it?" "The graduate program I told you about." "Oh." He looked briefly at the papers. Then his phone buzzed again. Another email. Another business issue. Another distraction. "Looks interesting." Ava waited, expecting more. The conversation ended there. Nathan never asked questions. Never looked through the information. Never noticed the disappointment she quietly hid behind a smile. It wasn't a major argument. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply one more small moment where she felt unseen. And relationships are rarely destroyed by one major event. More often, they're weakened by hundreds of small moments that quietly communicate, your needs matter less. The following months became even busier. Nathan's company secured several major contracts. His schedule became relentless. Many evenings ended with him arriving home long after midnight. Many mornings began before sunrise. Ava adapted. Again, and again, and again. Until adapting became her normal. One Saturday morning, she suggested taking a weekend trip together. Nothing extravagant, just a short drive to a nearby lake. A chance to reconnect. A chance to spend time together. Nathan agreed immediately. At least, at first. But the night before the trip, an investor scheduled an emergency meeting. "Can you reschedule the lake weekend?" he asked. Ava forced a smile. "Sure." The following month, she suggested another trip. The same thing happened. Then another. Then another. Eventually, she stopped asking. Not because she didn't want to spend time with him, because she already knew the answer. Months turned into years. Nathan became increasingly successful. His name began appearing in magazines. Industry conferences invited him to speak. People referred to him as a rising star. At home, however, things felt different. Conversations became shorter. Meals became quieter. The emotional connection they once shared started fading. One night, Ava sat alone in the living room, waiting for Nathan to come home. A movie played softly in the background. The clock reached 10, then 11, then midnight. Finally, Nathan walked through the door. He looked exhausted. "Ava, I'm sorry." She muted the television. "Long day?" "The longest." He dropped onto the couch, Neither spoke for several seconds. Then, Ava asked a simple question. "Are you happy?" Nathan looked surprised. "Of course." "No." She shook her head gently. "I mean, really happy." Nathan thought about it. The answer should have been easy. His company was growing. His income was increasing. His dreams were becoming reality. Yet something about the question made him uncomfortable. "I don't know." The admission surprised both of them. Ava studied him carefully. "You don't have to keep proving yourself every day." Nathan laughed quietly. "You sound like my mother." "I'm serious." "So am I." He rubbed his forehead. "If I slow down now, someone else gets ahead." Ava sighed. "There's always going to be someone ahead." Nathan looked away. The conversation ended without resolution, but her words lingered. Years later, he would remember them with painful clarity, because she had been right. No matter how much success he achieved, there was always another goal, another challenge, another mountain to climb. And in chasing all of them, he was slowly losing sight of what mattered most. The real turning point arrived 6 months later. Nathan received an offer that could transform the company forever. A massive expansion opportunity, one that required relocating temporarily and working nearly around the clock. The offer thrilled him. It terrified Ava, not because she wanted him to fail, because she knew what it would cost. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table discussing it. Nathan's excitement filled the room. Ava listened quietly. Finally, she asked, "What happens to us?" Nathan frowned. "What do you mean?" "If you accept this, we'll make it work." "How?" Nathan hesitated. The truth was, he hadn't thought much about it. His focus remained fixed on the opportunity, not the consequences. Ava noticed. And for the first time, something inside her shifted. Not anger, not resentment. Sadness. The realization that she had spent years supporting his dreams while her own remained permanently postponed. The realization that every future conversation centered around his goals, his plans, his ambitions, his success. She couldn't remember the last time someone had asked about hers, least of all Nathan. That night, after he went to sleep, Ava remained awake, sitting alone in the dark, thinking, reflecting, questioning. She still loved him, deeply. But love alone wasn't solving the growing distance between them. Love couldn't replace communication. Love couldn't replace appreciation. Love couldn't replace partnership. And for the first time in their marriage, Ava wondered something she had never allowed herself to consider before. What if she was losing herself while helping someone else find himself? The thought frightened her, because she didn't want to leave. She didn't want the marriage to fail. She wanted the man she had fallen in love with to notice what was happening, to notice her, to realize that relationships require attention just as businesses do. Unfortunately, Nathan remained too focused on the future to see what was slipping away in the present. And by the time he finally understood, the damage would already be done. Because while he was busy building a company, Ava was quietly reaching the end of her emotional strength. And neither of them realized how close they were to a breaking point. By the time Nathan's company celebrated its 5th anniversary, most people considered him a success story. The media loved him. Investors respected him. Young entrepreneurs admired him. Everywhere he went, people talked about his determination, his work ethic, his vision, his ability to overcome obstacles. Very few people talked about Ava, and if they did, it was usually as an afterthought. Nathan's wife. Nothing more. Nobody saw the sacrifices hidden behind that title. Not even Nathan. One Saturday morning, Ava stood in front of the bathroom mirror getting ready for an interview. It had been years since she had applied for a position that truly excited her. The opportunity came from a non-profit organization focused on community development. The work aligned perfectly with her passions. Helping underserved families, creating educational programs, building stronger communities. It wasn't glamorous. It wouldn't make her rich, but it mattered to her. And for the first time in a long time, she felt excited about something that belonged entirely to her. She walked into the kitchen carrying a folder filled with notes. Nathan sat at the table reviewing reports. 3 different screens surrounded him. His coffee had already gone cold. He barely noticed her enter. "Aren't you supposed to leave soon?" he asked without looking up. "My interview starts in 45 minutes. "Good luck." "Thanks." Ava lingered for a moment. Part of her hoped he would ask questions. "What position is it? Why are you excited? How long have you wanted this?" Anything. Instead, his attention remained fixed on the numbers in front of him. After a few seconds, she quietly left. The interview went well. Very well. A week later, they offered her the position. The salary wasn't extraordinary. The hours weren't perfect. But the work would give her purpose. A chance to pursue something she genuinely cared about. That evening, she shared the news with Nathan. "They offered me the job." Nathan looked up from his laptop. That's great! His smile was brief. Then his attention returned to the screen. Ava waited. Again, nothing. No questions, no celebration, no curiosity. Just another quick acknowledgement before work reclaimed his attention. The moment passed, but the disappointment remained. Not because Nathan intended to hurt her. Because feeling invisible can be painful even when nobody means to make you feel that way. Several months later, Ava began thriving in her new role. She loved helping people. She loved creating programs. She loved seeing positive change in the community. For the first time in years, she felt connected to her own goals again. Unfortunately, Nathan's success was accelerating faster than ever. The company expanded into multiple states. New contracts arrived constantly. Media interviews became routine. Business trips multiplied. Their schedules moved in opposite directions. One focused on people. The other focused on growth. And somewhere between those two worlds, they slowly stopped meeting in the middle. One evening, Ava arrived home excited after receiving recognition for a community initiative she had organized. The project had helped hundreds of families. She couldn't wait to tell Nathan. But when she entered the house, she immediately saw him pacing across the living room, phone pressed against his ear, frustration written across his face. That's unacceptable, he snapped. Ava quietly set down her bag. The call lasted another 30 minutes. Then, another call followed. Then, another. By the time Nathan finally finished, it was nearly midnight. Ava had already gone to bed. The next morning, he never asked about her day. He never learned about the award. Never learned about the families she helped. Never learned how proud she had been. Months later, she would realize that moment symbolized their entire relationship. She knew every detail about his victories. He knew very little about hers. As Nathan's company continued growing, invitations began arriving. Exclusive events, luxury retreats, networking conferences, many included spouses. At first, Ava attended enthusiastically. She wanted to support him. But over time, the events became exhausting. Conversations always centered on wealth, expansion, investments, status. People seemed more interested in what someone owned than who they were. One evening, after attending a corporate dinner, Ava sat quietly during the drive home. Nathan noticed. Everything okay? Ava stared out the window. Can I ask you something? Sure. When was the last time we talked about something other than your company? Nathan laughed lightly. What do you mean? I'm serious. He thought about it, then frowned. I don't know. Neither do I. Silence filled the car. Nathan suddenly realized he couldn't remember the last meaningful conversation they'd shared. Not about work, not about schedules, not about responsibilities, just them. The realization bothered him briefly, but like so many concerns, it was quickly buried beneath another busy week. Another meeting, another opportunity, another goal. And while Nathan focused on building his future, Ava quietly faced a difficult truth. She still loved her husband, but she was beginning to feel alone inside her own marriage. The loneliness wasn't caused by absence. Nathan was still there. He still came home, still provided financially, still fulfilled many responsibilities. But emotionally, he seemed further away with each passing year. One night, Ava opened an old journal. Inside were dreams she had written shortly after their wedding, places she wanted to visit, programs she hoped to create, goals she wanted to achieve, family traditions she imagined building. As she read through the pages, tears slowly filled her eyes. Not because she regretted supporting Nathan, because, somewhere along the way, she had stopped supporting herself. And for the first time, she wondered whether Nathan even noticed. The question stayed with her long after she closed the journal, because deep down, she already knew the answer. And that answer terrified her. More than any argument, more than any financial problem, more than any uncertainty about the future. Because relationships can survive difficult circumstances. What they struggle to survive is indifference. And indifference had quietly begun settling between them like an invisible wall. A wall growing taller every day. A wall neither of them yet understood would eventually change everything. The first time Ava seriously considered that something was wrong, it wasn't after an argument. It wasn't after a betrayal. It wasn't after a dramatic confrontation. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind of evening most people would forget. Nathan was sitting across from her at the dinner table, physically present, emotionally somewhere else. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Emails arrived constantly. Messages from executives appeared one after another. Ava watched him answer them between bites of food. Finally, she set down her fork. Nathan, do you remember what day tomorrow is? Nathan looked up briefly. Wednesday. Ava forced a small smile. No. Nathan frowned. For several seconds, He searched his memory. Nothing. Then, realization struck. Their wedding anniversary. Ava immediately recognized the look on his face. The guilt, the embarrassment, the panic. Oh. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not really. Because this wasn't the first forgotten moment. It was simply the latest one. Nathan reached across the table. I've just been busy. Ava nodded. The explanation sounded familiar. Too familiar. Busy. The word had become the answer to everything. Busy when she wanted to talk. Busy when she needed support. Busy when she wanted quality time. Busy when she hoped he would notice what was happening between them. Nathan wasn't a bad man. That made the situation harder. Because if he had been cruel, the solution would have been obvious. Instead, he was simply distracted, consumed, obsessed with success, and slowly losing sight of everything else. The following week, Ava received another opportunity, a leadership position within her organization. The promotion would require additional training and occasional travel. For the first time in years, someone was investing in her future. She was excited, nervous, hopeful. That evening she shared the news with Nathan. They want me to lead the regional program. Nathan looked up from his laptop. That's great. Ava waited, then waited some more. That's it? Nathan blinked. What do you mean? Aren't you going to ask any questions? His expression softened. I'm sorry. And for a moment, Ava saw genuine regret. But regret wasn't enough anymore. She needed attention, interest, partnership, things that couldn't be replaced by apologies. Nathan closed his laptop. A rare occurrence. Tell me everything. For the next 20 minutes, Ava explained the opportunity, the training, the responsibilities, the possibilities. Nathan listened, at least physically, but she could tell his mind kept drifting elsewhere. Toward work, toward business, toward the endless demands competing for his attention. The conversation eventually ended, and once again, Ava felt the same disappointment. Not because Nathan didn't care, because he cared less than he used to. Months passed. The distance continued growing. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. One Saturday afternoon, Ava attended a community awards ceremony. Several families she had helped over the years were present. Children she had mentored. Parents she had supported. Teachers she had worked alongside. The event meant a great deal to her. Nathan had promised to attend. He genuinely intended to, but an unexpected meeting appeared on his calendar. Then another, then another. By the time the ceremony began, he was still sitting inside a conference room downtown. Ava kept checking her phone. No messages, no updates, no explanation. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage alone. The applause filled the room. People celebrated her achievements. Yet one empty seat caught her attention. Nathan's seat. The seat that remained empty until the ceremony ended. Hours later, he finally called. Ava, I'm so sorry. She sat quietly in her car. It's fine. No, it's not. I know. The honesty surprised both of them. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Ava quietly asked, if this had been one of your events, would you have missed it? Nathan immediately knew the answer. No, never. Because his goals always received priority. His commitments always came first. The realization hit harder than he expected. But instead of confronting it, he did what he always did. He promised to do better. And for a while, he tried. He bought flowers, planned dinners, cleared space in his schedule. For a few weeks, things improved. Then business accelerated again, and everything returned to normal. Or at least, what had become normal. One evening, Ava sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. Nathan joined her. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt different, heavier, more fragile. Finally, Ava broke it. Can I ask you something? Of course. When was the last time you were truly happy? Nathan looked surprised. The question reminded him of one she had asked years earlier. Back then, he hadn't known the answer. Now, he knew even less. I don't know. Ava nodded slowly. I don't think I do either. Nathan stared at her. Something in her voice frightened him. Not anger, not frustration, resignation, the kind that appears after someone has been disappointed too many times. And suddenly, for the first time, Nathan sensed how serious things had become. What are you saying? Ava looked toward the fading sunlight. I'm saying I miss us. Nathan's chest tightened. I miss us too. But even as he said it, he wondered whether that was true. Did he miss her? Or did he miss the comfort of knowing she would always be there? The question lingered long after the conversation ended. That night, neither slept well. And somewhere deep inside, Ava began accepting a painful truth. Love still existed, But love alone wasn't repairing the damage, the dreams she had sacrificed, the opportunities she had postponed, the years spent waiting to be seen. Those things were becoming harder to ignore. Meanwhile, Nathan remained convinced they still had plenty of time. Time to reconnect. Time to fix things. Time to become the couple they once were. What he didn't realize was that relationships rarely collapse overnight. They erode gradually, one disappointment, one missed moment, one forgotten promise at a time. And by the time most people recognize the danger, the foundation has already begun to crack. The worst part, Nathan still believed he could save everything whenever he decided to. He had no idea that Ava was approaching a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The decision didn't happen overnight. Ava didn't wake up one morning and suddenly stop believing in her marriage. The truth was much more painful than that. It happened slowly, over months, then years, one disappointment at a time, one forgotten promise at a time, one lonely evening at a time. And while Ava was struggling to hold the relationship together, Nathan was experiencing the most successful period of his life. His company exploded. There was no other way to describe it. Revenue tripled within 18 months. Major corporations signed contracts. National media outlets featured him regularly. Investors who once ignored him now competed for opportunities to work with him. The company expanded across the country. Nathan became exactly what he had always dreamed of becoming. Powerful, respected, wealthy. The success felt incredible. At first, he bought a luxury penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline. The kind of home he used to admire in magazines. The kind of home that symbolized achievement. When he first received the keys, he stood beside Ava in the empty living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows surrounded them. The city stretched endlessly below. "We did it," Nathan said. Ava smiled. "We did." For a brief moment, they celebrated together. For a brief moment, it felt like all the sacrifices had finally been worth it. Unfortunately, success often introduces new challenges that struggle never does. When money was tight, Nathan and Ava relied on each other. When life was difficult, they solved problems together. When obstacles appeared, they faced them as a team. But now, Nathan needed Ava less. At least, that's what he unconsciously began believing. The change wasn't intentional. It was subtle. Dangerously subtle. Instead of sharing every decision, he started making them alone. Instead of asking for advice, he trusted executives and consultants. Instead of discussing dreams with Ava, he discussed strategy with investors. The partnership that once defined their marriage slowly began disappearing. One evening, Ava walked into the penthouse carrying groceries. The place looked more like a luxury hotel than a home. Modern furniture, expensive artwork, designer decorations. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt cold. Nathan sat in his office talking on a video call. Ava quietly unpacked groceries by herself. As she moved through the kitchen, she realized something strange. The apartment contained almost no signs of her. The furniture choices reflected Nathan's taste. The artwork reflected Nathan's preferences. The design reflected Nathan's lifestyle. Somehow, the place where they lived no longer felt like theirs. It felt like his. The realization stayed with her. Several weeks later, Nathan hosted a private dinner for potential investors. Executives filled the penthouse. Champagne flowed freely. Business conversations dominated the evening. Ava spent hours helping prepare everything. Greeting guests, serving food, making people feel welcome. By the end of the night, one investor approached Nathan. "You've built an impressive life." Nathan smiled. "Thank you." The investor looked around. "You should be proud." Nathan nodded. "I am." Ava stood nearby, listening, waiting, hoping, not for praise, not for recognition, just acknowledgement, something simple, something like, "We built this." Instead, Nathan accepted every compliment alone. The moment lasted only seconds, but it hurt more than she expected. Because she remembered the apartment above the laundromat. She remembered the sleepless nights, the financial sacrifices, the emotional support, the years spent helping him survive. And now, standing inside a penthouse she helped make possible, she felt invisible. That night, after the guests left, Ava finally spoke. "Nathan? Do you ever think about how we started?" Nathan laughed softly. "All the time." "Really?" "Of course." Ava studied him carefully. "What do you remember?" The question caught him off guard. Nathan thought for a moment. "The risks, the long hours, the uncertainty." Ava nodded, then waited. Nothing else came. No mention of her. No mention of their partnership. No mention of the sacrifices they made together. Only the company. Only the business. only the journey through his eyes. Ava looked away. For the first time, she realized they remembered the same years very differently, and that realization frightened her, because memories reveal what people value. Nathan remembered building a company. Ava remembered building a life. The problem was that those goals were no longer moving in the same direction. Months later, Nathan appeared on the cover of a major business magazine. The headline called him the self-made billionaire who changed American tech. Friends congratulated him. Employees celebrated. Social media exploded. Everyone loved the story. There was only one problem. Ava hated the phrase self-made, not because she wanted credit, because she knew nobody is truly self-made. Every successful person stands on the shoulders of people who help them. Parents, teachers, friends, mentors, partners, support systems. Yet the world kept repeating the same narrative. Nathan Carter, self-made billionaire, over and over again. Eventually, even Nathan started believing it. One Saturday morning, Ava found the magazine sitting on the kitchen counter. She stared at the cover, then quietly placed it in a drawer. Nathan noticed. "You don't like it?" Ava hesitated. "It's a great accomplishment." "But," she sighed, "do you ever feel uncomfortable when people call you self-made?" Nathan frowned. "Why would I?" Ava looked at him carefully. The answer told her everything she needed to know. Because years earlier, Nathan would have understood exactly what she meant. Now he didn't. Or perhaps he didn't want to. Either way, the distance between them continued growing. Neither fully understood how dangerous that distance had become. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The more successful Nathan became, the harder it was for him to see the people who helped him get there. And nowhere was that blindness more evident than in his relationship with Ava. Because, while the world celebrated the billionaire, he was becoming. The woman who once knew him best was slowly slipping away. By the following year, Nathan's life barely resembled the one he had shared with Ava in their early marriage. His schedule was booked months in advance. His assistants managed every hour of his day. His phone never stopped ringing. His calendar looked like a battlefield. Meetings, flights, interviews, conferences, investor dinners, corporate events. The busier he became, the more important he felt. And the more important he felt, the less attention he paid to the things that didn't directly contribute to his success, including his marriage. One Friday evening, Ava stood in front of the bathroom mirror, preparing for a charity fundraiser. The event wasn't related to Nathan's company. It was organized by the community organization where she worked. For months, she had helped plan it. The fundraiser would support educational programs for low-income families. She cared deeply about its success. More importantly, she wanted Nathan there, not as a billionaire guest, not as a donor, as her husband. When Nathan walked into the bedroom, she smiled. "Don't forget we need to leave by 6. The expression on his face immediately told her something was wrong. Ava's stomach tightened. "What?" Nathan looked uncomfortable. "I completely forgot." Her smile faded. "You forgot?" There was a last-minute investor dinner. Ava stared at him. "Nathan, I know. You promised." "I know." The silence that followed felt heavy. Months earlier, Ava would have argued. She would have explained why the event mattered, why she needed his support, why his presence was important. Tonight, she simply nodded. "Okay." Nathan frowned. "That's it? What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." Neither did she, because she was running out of words. Running out of ways to explain something he should already understand. A few hours later, Ava attended the fundraiser alone. The event was successful. Families shared stories. Children received scholarships. Volunteers celebrated. Everyone seemed happy. Yet, throughout the evening, Ava couldn't stop noticing couples sitting together, laughing together, supporting each other. The sight created a loneliness she couldn't ignore. Not because Nathan wasn't physically present, because emotionally he hadn't been present in a very long time. Meanwhile, across the city, Nathan sat inside an expensive restaurant discussing expansion plans. The meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. By the time it ended, he felt exhausted. As he walked toward his car, he checked social media. One photograph caught his attention. Ava, standing on stage, accepting recognition for her work. The smile on her face looked genuine, but her eyes seemed different. Sadder, more distant. Nathan stared at the image longer than necessary. Something about it bothered him, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. For the first time, he wondered whether he was missing more than events. Perhaps he was missing entire chapters of her life. The thought lingered, but not long enough. The following weeks brought another major opportunity. Nathan's company prepared for an acquisition that could dramatically increase its value. The negotiations consumed him. Everything else became secondary. One evening, Ava tried initiating a conversation. "Nathan, can we talk?" He continued typing. "Sure." She waited. Several seconds passed. His eyes never left the laptop screen. Ava sighed. "Never mind." Nathan looked up. "What?" "Nothing." "No. What were you going to say?" Ava hesitated, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter." The truth was, she no longer believed talking would change anything. And that realization frightened her, because communication problems can often be fixed. Losing hope is much harder. A few days later, Ava met her longtime friend Rachel for lunch. Rachel listened carefully as Ava described her marriage. Not the dramatic parts, the ordinary parts, the loneliness, the distance, the feeling of becoming invisible. When Ava finished, Rachel asked a simple question. "Are you happy?" The question echoed through Ava's mind. The same question she had asked Nathan months earlier. And just like him, she struggled to answer. "I love him." Rachel nodded. "That's not what I asked." Ava looked down at her coffee. Several seconds passed. Then came the answer. "No." The word felt strange, painful, honest. For the first time she admitted it out loud. She wasn't happy. Not because of money. Not because of circumstances. Because she no longer felt valued. Rachel reached across the table. "You deserve to be seen, Ava." The words nearly brought tears to her eyes. Because deep down, she knew they were true. The real question was whether Nathan still saw her at all. Back at the company, Richard Bennett had begun noticing changes in Nathan. The older investor had watched him evolve over the years. He admired Nathan's ambition, respected his intelligence, but increasingly, he worried about his character. One afternoon, Richard invited Nathan to lunch. Halfway through the meal, he asked an unexpected question. "How's Ava?" Nathan looked surprised. "She's fine." Richard studied him. "That's all?" Nathan shrugged. "What else is there to say?" Richard leaned back. The answer concerned him more than Nathan realized. Years earlier, Nathan would have spent 20 minutes talking about Ava. Now, he barely spent 20 seconds. Richard changed the subject. But privately, he began wondering whether success was costing Nathan something far more valuable than he understood. That evening, Ava returned home late. Nathan was already there. An unusual occurrence. For several minutes, they sat together in silence. Then, Nathan spoke. "I think things will calm down after the acquisition." Ava looked at him. "What will?" "Work." The statement sounded familiar. Too familiar. She had heard versions of it for years. After this project, after this deal, after this expansion, after this quarter, the finish line always moved. The peace he promised never arrived. Ava smiled sadly. "You've been saying that for a long time." Nathan had no response. Because she was right. And for the first time, he began sensing that apologies and promises might no longer be enough. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in missed moments, forgotten priorities, unspoken disappointments, years of emotional neglect. And despite all his intelligence, all his resources, and all his success, Nathan still failed to recognize one critical truth. Problems become much harder to solve when you wait until someone has already started giving up. As the weeks passed, Ava quietly began preparing for a future she never imagined. A future without Nathan. Not because she wanted it, because she was starting to believe it might be necessary. And when that thought finally settled into her heart, everything changed. The marriage wasn't over yet. But for the first time, the possibility felt real, very real. And neither of them were prepared for what would happen next. Nathan didn't realize things were serious until Ava stopped complaining. Ironically, that was the moment he should have been most concerned. For years, Ava had tried. She had started conversations, expressed concerns, suggested solutions, asked for more time together, asked for more communication, asked for more partnership. Now, she asked for nothing. At first, Nathan interpreted the change as improvement. The arguments had stopped. The tension seemed lower. Life felt calmer. What he failed to understand was that calm and connection were not the same thing. Sometimes people stop fighting because they've stopped believing anything will change. One Tuesday evening, Nathan arrived home earlier than usual. He considered it a small victory. The acquisition deal was nearly complete. Several major projects were finally settling down. For the first time in months, he felt optimistic about the future. Maybe now things could improve. Maybe now he could focus more on his marriage. As he entered the penthouse, he noticed Ava sitting near the windows overlooking the city. A notebook rested in her lap. She seemed lost in thought. Nathan smiled. "Hey." Ava looked up. "Hey." He walked over and kissed her forehead. A simple gesture, one that once felt natural. Now it felt unfamiliar. "Good day?" Ava nodded. "It was okay." Nathan sat beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Ava closed the notebook. "Nathan, can we talk?" The seriousness in her voice immediately caught his attention. "Sure." She took a deep breath, the kind of breath people take before saying something difficult. "I'm tired." Nathan frowned. "Of work?" Ava shook her head. "Of this." The words landed heavily. Nathan sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" Ava stared out the window, as if gathering strength. "I'm tired of feeling invisible." Nathan's chest tightened. "Ava, no." She raised a hand gently. "Please, let me finish." Nathan nodded. Ava looked at him. Really looked at him. The way people do when they're desperately hoping to be understood. "I've spent years trying to explain how lonely I've been." Nathan remained silent. "I know you love me." Those words surprised him, because despite everything, she still believed that. The problem was what came next. But love isn't the issue anymore. Nathan felt a knot forming in his stomach. "What is the issue?" Ava's eyes filled with sadness. "You stopped choosing us." The statement hurt because it was true. Not entirely, not intentionally, but true enough. Every major decision over the past several years had centered around Nathan's goals, Nathan's company, Nathan's opportunities, Nathan's future. Somewhere along the way, their future had become secondary. Nathan rubbed his face. "I've been building something for us." Ava smiled sadly. "No." The single word cut deeper than any argument. "You've been building something for yourself." The silence that followed felt endless. Nathan searched for a response, an explanation, a defense. Nothing sounded convincing. Because deep down, part of him knew she was right. For years he had assumed financial security compensated for emotional absence. He assumed providing was enough. He assumed success would eventually fix everything. Instead, it had exposed everything. Ava stood and walked toward the windows. The city lights illuminated her reflection. "You know what's strange?" Nathan said nothing. "I used to tell everyone how lucky I was." The words broke his heart, because he remembered those days, the early years, the partnership, the friendship, the laughter, the certainty that they could survive anything together. Ava continued, "Now people look at my life and assume I should be happy." Nathan looked around the luxurious penthouse, the expensive furniture, the incredible view, the symbols of success. None of it mattered in that moment, because none of it addressed what she was saying. "Money solved a lot of problems," Ava said quietly, "but it didn't solve loneliness." Nathan lowered his eyes. For the first time in years, he truly listened. Not as a businessman, not as someone preparing a response, as a husband. Unfortunately, the listening had arrived very late, very, very late. Over the following weeks, the conversation continued, sometimes calmly, sometimes emotionally, sometimes through long silences. Nathan tried making changes. He cancelled meetings, scheduled date nights, reduced travel, spent more time at home, but every effort felt reactive, like someone trying to repair a leaking roof after years of ignoring the damage. One evening, after dinner, Nathan looked across the table. "I can fix this." Ava's expression softened. That response somehow hurt more than anger would have, because she wanted to believe him. She really did. But trust wasn't built through promises. Trust was built through patterns. And the pattern had existed for too long. A few days later, they attended a marriage counseling session, then another, then another. The counselor asked difficult questions. Questions neither wanted to answer. Questions that forced them to examine years of unresolved issues. One afternoon, the counselor asked Ava something simple. "What do you need from Nathan?" Ava thought for several seconds, then answered quietly, "I need him to see me." The room fell silent. Nathan felt tears threaten for the first time in years, because he realized how heartbreaking that answer was. Not more money, not more gifts, not more luxury, just recognition, just partnership, just feeling seen. And somehow, despite everything he had achieved, he had failed to provide something so basic. The realization haunted him. But realization alone wasn't enough. Because while Nathan was finally waking up to the problem, Ava was running out of energy to keep fighting for the solution. And for the first time, Nathan began facing a terrifying possibility. Maybe this wasn't a rough patch. Maybe this wasn't temporary. Maybe he was about to lose the person who had stood beside him through every struggle. And if that happened, no amount of success would be able to replace her. For the first time in years, Nathan was afraid. Not afraid of losing money. Not afraid of losing investors. Not afraid of losing business opportunities. He was afraid of losing Ava. And unlike business problems, this wasn't something he could solve with a strategy meeting or a bigger budget. This was personal. Painfully personal. Over the next several weeks, Nathan made a genuine effort to change. He left the office earlier, turned off his phone during dinner, cancelled unnecessary trips. He even delegated responsibilities he normally refused to share. His employees were shocked. His executives were confused. For years, Nathan had treated work like the center of his universe. Suddenly, he was trying to build boundaries, trying to save his marriage, trying to become the husband Ava had needed all along. The problem was that change takes time. And time was the one thing they no longer had. One Saturday morning, Nathan surprised Ava with breakfast. Pancakes, coffee, fresh fruit, simple things. The kind of things they used to enjoy together years ago. When Ava walked into the kitchen, she smiled. For a brief moment, Nathan felt hopeful. Maybe things could still work. Maybe it wasn't too late. They spent the morning talking. Not about business, not about schedules, just life, old memories, funny stories, dreams they once shared. For a few hours, it felt like the old days. The experience reminded Nathan of something painful. The connection was still there, buried beneath years of neglect, but still there. That realization gave him hope. Unfortunately, Ava experienced the morning differently. To her, it felt bittersweet, because it proved something she had feared for a long time. Nathan was capable of giving her what she needed. He simply hadn't chosen to. Not until the marriage was already falling apart. A few weeks later, they attended another counseling session. The counselor asked Nathan a difficult question. When did you first realize your marriage was in trouble? Nathan thought carefully. About 6 months ago. The counselor nodded, then turned toward Ava. When did you first realize it? Ava looked down. Her answer barely rose above a whisper. About 5 years ago. The room fell silent. Nathan felt as if someone had punched him in the chest. 5 years. 5 years. While he was celebrating growth, expansion, and success, Ava had been quietly struggling, trying, waiting, hoping. For 5 years, the realization was devastating. After the session, they sat together in the parking lot. Neither spoke. Neither knew what to say. Eventually, Ava broke the silence. I don't blame you. Nathan looked at her. The statement surprised him. Why not? Ava gave a tired smile. Because I know you never meant to hurt me. The words somehow made everything worse. Because she was right. He never intended to hurt her. But intent doesn't erase consequences. Good intentions don't heal emotional wounds. And love doesn't automatically protect relationships from neglect. For the first time, Nathan truly understood that. Several days later, Ava made a decision. One she had been avoiding for months. Perhaps years. She asked Nathan to meet her in the living room after dinner. The moment he saw her expression, he knew. His stomach dropped. His heart raced. Every instinct told him what was coming. Still, he wasn't prepared. Ava sat across from him. Calm, composed, heartbroken. Nathan, his throat tightened. Please don't. Ava's eyes immediately filled with tears, because his response confirmed everything he already knew. I think we need to end this. The words shattered something inside him. For several seconds, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he had just heard. No. The response came automatically, almost like a reflex. Ava, no. She closed her eyes. Tears escaped despite her efforts to stop them. I can't keep doing this. We can fix it. Her expression broke his heart, because she wanted to believe that. Once upon a time, she would have, but not anymore. I've spent years waiting for things to change. Nathan leaned forward. They are changing. Now. The single word hung in the air. Heavy, painful, unavoidable. Now. Not last year. Not 3 years ago. Not 5 years ago. Now. Only now. Because now, Nathan was afraid. The truth was impossible to deny. And both of them knew it. The weeks that followed felt surreal. Lawyers became involved. Documents appeared. Meetings were scheduled. Decisions had to be made. Through it all, there was remarkably little anger, which somehow made everything more painful. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic betrayals, no scandals, just two people grieving the life they once imagined together. Friends were shocked. Family members were confused. From the outside, the divorce made no sense. People saw wealth, success, a beautiful home, financial security. They assumed those things created happiness. They didn't see the loneliness, the missed moments, the years of emotional distance. They didn't understand that relationships often fail long before they officially end. The final paperwork was signed on a rainy afternoon. Nathan stared at the documents for a long time. unable to accept what was happening. Ava remained calm, but her hands trembled slightly. The divorce wasn't a victory for either of them. It was a loss, a painful one. When everything was finished, they walked outside together. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. For several moments they stood in silence. Then Nathan asked the question he had been avoiding. "Do you hate me?" Ava looked surprised, then shook her head. "No." The answer hurt more than hatred ever could, because it meant love still existed somewhere beneath the pain. It simply wasn't enough anymore. Nathan lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." Ava nodded. "I know." And she did know. That was the tragedy. Nathan wasn't malicious, wasn't cruel, wasn't unfaithful. He simply spent too many years assuming the woman who loved him would always wait. Eventually, everyone reaches a limit. Even the most patient people. Especially the most patient people. Ava stepped toward her car, then paused. "Nathan?" He looked up. "I hope you find what you're looking for." The words stayed with him long after she drove away, because for the first time, he wasn't sure what he was looking for anymore. Success? He already had it. Money? He had more than enough. Status? People admired him everywhere he went. Yet, as he stood alone in the rain, none of those things felt meaningful. For the first time in his adult life, Nathan felt truly unsuccessful. Not because he had lost a company, because he had lost the person who helped him build it. And although he didn't realize it yet, the biggest lessons of his life were only beginning. The truth about his success, the truth about Ava, and the truth about himself. All of it remained hidden just beyond the horizon, waiting, patiently, for the day it would finally come to light. Before we move on to Chapter 6, let's pause for a moment. Nathan and Ava's story teaches a painful lesson. Sometimes, people don't leave because they stopped loving you. They leave because they got tired of feeling unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. Ava didn't walk away after one bad day. She walked away after years of waiting for things to change. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Nathan deserved another chance? Or do you believe Ava made the right decision by ending the marriage? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story is touching your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful love story filled with life-changing lessons. Up next in Chapter 6, Nathan begins a new chapter of his life with Olivia. From the outside, everything will look perfect. Wealth, luxury, and admiration. But behind the smiles and glamorous photos, a different truth is waiting to be revealed. Let's continue. For the first 6 months after the divorce, Nathan threw himself into work. It was the only thing that made sense. The only thing he knew how to control. Whenever the silence in his penthouse became too loud, he worked. Whenever memories of Ava surfaced, he worked. Whenever loneliness crept in, he worked even harder. His company continued growing. His wealth increased. His public profile expanded. From the outside, he appeared unstoppable. Inside, however, something felt missing. Nathan simply refused to acknowledge it. Then he met Olivia. Their first meeting happened at a fundraising gala in New York. Ironically, it was the same type of event where he would later humiliate Ava years afterward. At the time, however, none of that had happened yet. Nathan was standing near the bar when a mutual acquaintance introduced them. "Olivia Hayes, meet Nathan Carter." Olivia smiled. Nathan immediately noticed her confidence. She carried herself effortlessly, elegant, sophisticated, comfortable in elite social circles. The conversation flowed naturally. Unlike Ava, who preferred meaningful discussions and community work, Olivia thrived in the world Nathan now occupied. Business events, luxury gatherings, high-profile networking, media appearances. They understood the same environment, shared similar lifestyles, moved through the same circles. At first, the relationship felt easy, refreshing. There were no difficult conversations about emotional neglect, no painful reminders of past mistakes, no uncomfortable discussions about what had gone wrong. Just excitement, attraction, new beginnings. And after the pain of divorce, that felt like a gift. Several months later, Nathan and Olivia became inseparable. Magazines began featuring them together. Social media accounts posted photographs from vacations. Business publications described them as a power couple. People admired them. Envy followed them. Everything looked perfect. Nathan convinced himself he had finally moved on. One afternoon, while reviewing photographs from a charity event, Olivia laughed. "We're becoming one of those couples." Nathan looked up. "What couples?" "The couples people think have perfect lives." Nathan smiled. "Maybe we do." Olivia laughed. "Nobody has a perfect life." At the time, Nathan dismissed the comment. Years later, he would realize how wise it was. The wedding took place 18 months after his divorce. The ceremony was beautiful, expensive, exclusive. Everything the media expected from a billionaire marriage. Guests traveled from across the country. Business leaders attended. Celebrities attended. Politicians attended. The event dominated social media for days. Everyone celebrated. Everyone congratulated them. Everyone assumed this was Nathan's happy ending. Nobody noticed the older investor sitting quietly near the back. Richard Bennett, watching, observing, worrying. Not because he disliked Olivia. He actually respected her. Richard worried because he understood something Nathan did not. Unresolved lessons have a way of repeating themselves. And Nathan still hadn't fully learned the lessons from his first marriage. Months after the wedding, life settled into a routine. A glamorous routine, but a routine nonetheless. Nathan and Olivia attended events together, hosted dinners, traveled frequently, appeared in magazines. The world loved them. The world loved the image they represented. Success, beauty, influence, achievement. Yet beneath the surface, subtle differences began emerging. One evening, Nathan returned home after a difficult day. A major deal had fallen apart. An important executive had resigned unexpectedly. The stress weighed heavily on him. When he entered the penthouse, Olivia looked up from her tablet. "Tough day?" Nathan nodded. "Very. Sorry to hear that." Then she returned to reading. The interaction lasted less than 10 seconds. Nathan paused. Something felt strange, not wrong, just different. Years earlier, Ava would have asked questions, listened, offered encouragement, tried helping him process the situation. Olivia wasn't being cold. She simply approached problems differently. And for the first time, Nathan noticed. The realization surprised him, because he hadn't thought about Ava in months. Not consciously. Yet suddenly, comparisons appeared. Small ones, unwelcome ones. The following weekend, Nathan and Olivia attended another social event. Halfway through the evening, a guest asked an innocent question. "How did you two meet?" Olivia smiled. The story was simple. A gala, a conversation, a connection. As she spoke, Nathan found himself remembering something else. A tiny coffee shop years earlier. Ava studying for an exam. Him working on a business proposal. A conversation that lasted 3 hours. A connection built through friendship before romance. The memory arrived unexpectedly, then disappeared just as quickly. Still, it left something behind. A feeling, difficult to identify, even harder to ignore. Over the following months, moments like that became more frequent. Small reminders, unexpected comparisons, not because Nathan wanted Ava back, because certain qualities became easier to appreciate in hindsight. Patience, empathy, support, presence. Characteristics he once viewed as ordinary. Characteristics he now realized were rare. One evening, Olivia noticed his mood. "You seem distracted lately." Nathan looked up. "What makes you say that?" "You spend a lot of time thinking." He laughed softly. "Thinking isn't usually a problem." "It can be." Olivia smiled. "Depending on what you're thinking about." Nathan changed the subject, but her observation stayed with him, because she wasn't wrong. He had been thinking more, reflecting more, questioning more. The strange part was that despite all his success, despite the new marriage, despite the glamorous lifestyle, the certainty he once felt was slowly disappearing. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough to make him uncomfortable. Just enough to make him wonder whether happiness was more complicated than he once believed. And as that uncertainty grew, another realization quietly followed. The life he thought he wanted wasn't quite as fulfilling as he imagined. The problem was that Nathan still couldn't identify what was missing. Not yet. But the answer was getting closer. And so was the truth. At first, Nathan convinced himself the feeling would pass. Everyone experienced periods of dissatisfaction. Everyone questioned their choices occasionally. That didn't mean anything was wrong. At least, that was what he told himself. So, he continued moving forward. Business meetings, corporate events, luxury vacations, exclusive gatherings. His calendar remained full. His life remained impressive. And yet, the strange emptiness refused to disappear. One evening, Nathan and Olivia attended a fundraising dinner at a luxury hotel. The ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Guests laughed. Music played softly. Champagne flowed freely. From the outside, it looked like another perfect night. Halfway through dinner, a young entrepreneur approached Nathan. "I really admire your story." Nathan smiled politely. "Thank you." The man seemed excited. "You built everything from nothing." Nathan nodded. The compliment was familiar. He had heard versions of it hundreds of times. Then the entrepreneur added something unexpected. My wife has been supporting me through my startup journey. Honestly, I couldn't do any of this without her. Nathan froze for a moment. The comment shouldn't have affected him. Yet somehow, it did. The young man continued speaking, proudly describing his wife's sacrifices, her encouragement, her support, the way she helped him through difficult years. Nathan listened quietly, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Ava entered his thoughts again. Not dramatically, not romantically, simply as a memory, a reminder, a piece of his past he seemed unable to completely leave behind. The conversation ended. The entrepreneur walked away, but the feeling remained. Later that night, Olivia noticed his silence. You seem somewhere else. Nathan forced a smile. Just tired. Olivia studied him carefully, then nodded. She didn't push further. That was one of the biggest differences between Olivia and Ava. Olivia respected boundaries, sometimes too much. If Nathan wanted to talk, she listened. If he didn't, she gave him space. There was nothing wrong with that. But occasionally, Nathan missed having someone who insisted on understanding him. Someone who looked past his answers and asked deeper questions. The realization made him uncomfortable, because it forced him to acknowledge something important. He had spent years focusing on what Ava lacked. Now he was noticing things she had quietly provided. The irony wasn't lost on him. Several weeks later, Nathan attended a company retreat. The event brought together executives, investors, and senior leadership. Richard Bennett was there. As always, the older investor had become one of the few people willing to challenge Nathan directly. Most people simply agreed with him. Success tends to create that problem. People stop being honest. They start telling powerful individuals what they want to hear. Richard refused to play that game. One afternoon, after a leadership presentation, Richard approached Nathan. "Walk with me." Nathan followed him outside. The retreat center overlooked a beautiful lake. The scenery felt peaceful, a sharp contrast to the conversation that followed. Richard spoke first. "Are you happy?" Nathan laughed. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Richard raised an eyebrow. Interesting response. Nathan sighed. "I'm fine." Richard stopped walking, then looked directly at him. "That's not what I asked." The words sounded familiar, painfully familiar. Ava had said something similar years earlier. For a moment, Nathan felt trapped between memories and reality. "I have a great life." Richard nodded. "I know. I have a successful company. I know. A wonderful wife." "I know." Nathan frowned. "Then what's the problem?" Richard's answer arrived immediately. "You tell me." The conversation irritated Nathan, because deep down he didn't have an answer, and he hated not having answers, especially about his own life. Richard eventually changed the subject, but before they returned inside, he left Nathan with one final thought. Success can be dangerous. Nathan laughed. "Most people would disagree." Richard smiled sadly. "Most people don't understand that success often reveals who we are." The comment lingered, much like so many of Richard's comments did. Back home, life continued. Months passed. The distance between Nathan and Olivia slowly increased, not because they fought, not because they disliked each other, because something essential was missing. Their relationship worked well on paper. They respected each other, supported each other professionally, enjoyed spending time together. Yet emotional depth remained elusive. One evening, while preparing for a charity event, Olivia unexpectedly spoke up. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan looked up. "Sure. Do you ever think about Ava?" The question hit him like a punch. His hands froze. For a second, neither moved. Then Nathan slowly replied, "Why would you ask that?" Olivia smiled sadly. "Because you're not as difficult to read as you think." Nathan looked away. The silence provided its own answer. Olivia sighed. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I don't think about her like that." "I know." And she did know. This wasn't about lingering romantic feelings. It was about unfinished understanding. Unfinished lessons. Unfinished reflection. Olivia sat beside him. "You know what I think?" Nathan remained silent. "I think you're finally starting to see your first marriage clearly." The observation stunned him, because it was true, painfully true. For years, he had viewed the divorce through a simple lens. Two people grew apart. The marriage ended. Life moved on. Now the picture seemed far more complicated. Now, he was beginning to see the role he played, the mistakes he made, the things he failed to appreciate. Olivia continued softly. "Sometimes people don't understand what they had until they can no longer take it for granted." Nathan lowered his eyes. The words hurt, because they contained truth. And truth often hurts before it helps. That night, after Olivia went to bed, Nathan remained awake, looking out across the city skyline, thinking, reflecting, questioning. The same questions kept returning. Was he happy? Had success changed him? Had he become someone his younger self wouldn't recognize? Most importantly, had he truly appreciated the people who helped him build the life he now enjoyed? The answers frightened him, because for the first time, he suspected they might be no. And somewhere across the city, completely unaware of the impact she still had on his thinking, Ava continued living her life, building something meaningful, helping others, moving forward, while Nathan remained trapped between the man he used to be and the man he was becoming. A transition he still didn't fully understand, but very soon, circumstances would force him to, because hidden inside old company records, buried beneath years of success, a truth was waiting, a truth capable of changing everything Nathan believed about his past. And when that truth finally surfaced, there would be no ignoring it, no escaping it, and no rewriting it. The discovery happened by accident. The most life-changing truths often do. Nathan wasn't searching for answers about Ava. He wasn't investigating the past. He wasn't questioning the story he had told himself for years. At least, not intentionally. He was preparing for his company's 20th anniversary celebration. The event would be one of the largest corporate gatherings in the company's history. Major investors, executives, industry leaders, media representatives, everyone important would attend. The anniversary would celebrate 2 decades of growth and success. And, naturally, Nathan would be at the center of it all. Several months before the event, a special team was assigned to create a documentary about the company's history. They wanted photographs, emails, business records, stories from the early years, anything that could help tell the company's journey. One afternoon, Nathan's executive assistant entered his office. "We're missing some of the early documents." Nathan barely looked up. "Check storage." "We already did." "Then check again." The assistant hesitated. "There are several boxes in the archive room, labeled with your handwriting." Nathan sighed. "Fine." An hour later, he found himself standing inside a dusty storage facility owned by the company. The building held years of forgotten records, old computers, archived contracts, boxes filled with documents nobody had touched in decades. Nathan hadn't visited the place in years. Most of the company's early history existed there. The history people rarely discussed anymore. A maintenance worker pointed toward a corner. "I think those are the boxes." Nathan walked over. Several cardboard containers sat stacked against a wall. Dust covered nearly everything. For a moment, he simply stared at them. Strange. These boxes contained the foundation of everything he had built. Yet he couldn't remember the last time he looked at any of it. He opened the first box. Old contracts, tax documents, financial records, nothing particularly interesting. The second box contained photographs, company events, early employees, small celebrations from difficult years. Nathan smiled at several familiar faces. Many of those employees had moved on. Some had retired. A few had passed away. The images reminded him how much time had passed. Then he opened the third box, and everything changed. Inside sat dozens of folders, notebooks, printed emails, meeting notes, business plans. Nathan began sorting through them. At first, he paid little attention. Then, one document caught his eye. A proposal. One of the earliest growth strategies in company history. Nathan remembered presenting it to investors years earlier. The proposal had been instrumental in securing critical funding. Without it, the company might not have survived. He flipped through the pages, then paused. His name wasn't listed as the author. Ava's was. Nathan frowned. That couldn't be right. He looked again. There it was, clearly typed on the cover page. Prepared by Ava Mitchell. A strange feeling settled over him. Confusion. He remembered the proposal. He remembered using it. What he didn't remember was Ava creating it. Nathan searched through additional folders. Another document appeared. Then another. Then another. The pattern continued. Business analyses, market research, investor summaries, presentation outlines. Many carried Ava's name. Many had directly influenced decisions that shaped the company's future. Nathan stared at the papers, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. How had he forgotten this? More importantly, how much had he forgotten? For the next 2 hours, he continued searching. The deeper he looked, the more uncomfortable he became. Evidence appeared everywhere. Ideas, strategies, solutions, suggestions. Ava's fingerprints seemed embedded throughout the company's earliest years. Not as an employee, not as an executive, as a partner, a genuine partner. One document stopped him completely. An email exchange from nearly 20 years earlier. Back when the company was struggling. Back when failure felt inevitable. Nathan remembered the crisis immediately. A major client had cancelled a contract. Cash flow problems threatened the business. Several employees were preparing to leave. The future looked bleak. Nathan opened the email. The message came from Ava. It contained a detailed recovery strategy, specific recommendations, cost-saving measures, new client opportunities. Several suggestions eventually became company policy. Nathan remembered implementing many of them. What he didn't remember was where they originated. His chest tightened. The realization felt uncomfortable. Not because Ava contributed. He always knew she had supported him. The uncomfortable part was the scale, the significance, the extent of her involvement. This wasn't occasional encouragement. This wasn't emotional support alone. These were meaningful contributions, practical contributions, business contributions, contributions that directly affected the company's survival. Nathan sank into a chair. Suddenly, memories returned. Late-night conversations at their tiny apartment. Ava reviewing documents, offering feedback, suggesting ideas, asking questions he hadn't considered. Back then, they discussed everything together. Every challenge, every opportunity, every problem. Somewhere along the way, he stopped remembering those conversations accurately. Or perhaps he stopped valuing them accurately. The distinction didn't matter. The result was the same. His understanding of the past was incomplete. Dangerously incomplete. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Finding anything interesting? Nathan looked up. Richard Bennett stood in the doorway. The older investor smiled knowingly, almost as if he already understood what was happening. Nathan held up the folder. Did you know about this? Richard walked closer, glanced at the documents, then nodded. Of course. Nathan stared at him. You knew? I was there. The answer landed heavily. Nathan suddenly felt foolish. Of course Richard knew. Richard had witnessed the company's earliest years firsthand. He remembered things Nathan apparently did not. What else do you know? Richard studied him carefully, then sighed. A lot. Nathan felt his stomach tighten, because something about Richard's tone suggested this discovery was only the beginning. And judging by the expression on the older man's face, the full truth might be much bigger than Nathan was prepared for. Much bigger, and far more painful. Nathan stared at Richard Bennett. The dusty archive room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, heavier. The folders spread across the table no longer looked like ordinary documents. They looked like evidence. Evidence that the story Nathan had spent years telling himself was incomplete, maybe even wrong. Richard pulled out a chair and sat down. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Nathan finally broke the silence. How much did Ava actually do? Richard leaned back. The question seemed simple. The answer wasn't. A better question would be, Richard said, how much do you remember? Nathan frowned. I remember she supported me. Richard nodded. Of course she did. No, I mean really supported me. Richard looked at the papers scattered across the table, then back at Nathan. And yet, you're surprised by what you're finding. The observation stung, because it was true. Nathan was surprised, far more surprised than he should have been. Richard picked up one of the folders. This proposal helped convince me to invest. Nathan stared. Ava wrote that? Mostly. The older investor smiled faintly. You delivered it beautifully. Nathan said nothing. Richard continued. But the structure, research, and risk analysis came from Ava. Nathan felt his chest tighten. Years ago, he had proudly told people how that proposal changed everything. How it helped secure funding. How it helped save the company. Never once had he mentioned Ava's role. Not intentionally. Because somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing the full picture. Richard opened another folder. Do you remember the Milwaukee expansion? Nathan nodded immediately. One of the company's earliest successes. The expansion opened new markets, created significant revenue, strengthened the company's reputation. It had been a turning point. Richard slid a document toward him. Ava's handwriting covered the margins. Notes, recommendations, warnings, suggestions. Nathan stared at the pages. He remembered discussing the expansion with her. Now he realized how much of the final strategy reflected her ideas. The realization felt unsettling, like discovering hidden chapters inside a book he thought he already knew. Richard watched him quietly, then asked, Do you know why I liked Ava? Nathan looked up. The question caught him off guard. Richard smiled. Because she challenged you. Nathan remained silent. The investor continued. Most people agreed with you. Ava didn't. She questioned assumptions, pointed out risks, forced you to think deeper. Nathan lowered his eyes. The memories were becoming clearer now, painfully clear. He remembered those conversations, late nights, kitchen tables, stacks of papers, endless discussions. Back then, he appreciated them. At least, he thought he did. So how had he forgotten? Richard seemed to sense the question. You didn't forget. Nathan looked confused. What do you mean? You minimized. The words landed like a hammer. You remembered her support. Richard continued. But over time, you reduced it to emotional support. Nathan's stomach tightened, because that was exactly what had happened. When people asked about Ava, he described her as supportive, loyal, encouraging, all true, but incomplete, very incomplete. The more successful he became, the more simplified the story became, until eventually Ava's role faded into the background entirely. Richard stood and walked toward an old filing cabinet. After searching briefly, he pulled out another folder. This one looked older than the others, more worn, more fragile. When he handed it to Nathan, his expression became serious. You should read this. Nathan opened the folder. Inside sat copies of bank statements, loan documents, financial records. At first, he didn't understand their significance. Then he noticed something. The account holder, Ava Mitchell. Nathan frowned. What is this? Richard folded his arms. Keep reading. Nathan turned the page. Then another. His heart began racing. Years earlier, during one of the company's most difficult periods, Ava had taken out a personal loan. A large one. Far larger than he remembered. The funds had eventually reached the company. Nathan remembered receiving emergency financial support. What he didn't remember was where all of it came from. His eyes widened. She never told me. Richard nodded. No. Why? Because she didn't want you carrying more stress. Nathan sat frozen, unable to process what he was reading. The loan carried significant risk. If the company had failed, Ava would have faced serious financial consequences. Consequences she accepted willingly, without recognition, without guarantees, without demanding credit. Nathan closed the folder slowly. His hands trembled slightly. For years he had described himself as self-made. For years he had accepted praise, awards, interviews, recognition, never once realizing how much had been hidden beneath the surface. Richard sat down again. His voice softened. You weren't the only person sacrificing back then. The statement shattered something inside Nathan, because deep down, he knew it was true. During difficult years, he always viewed himself as the primary risk-taker, the primary dreamer, the primary builder. Now, another truth emerged. Ava had been risking things too. Dreams, opportunities, financial security, time, emotional energy, perhaps even parts of herself. And she had done it quietly, without demanding recognition, without seeking applause, without appearing on magazine covers. Nathan stared at the old documents. A painful question surfaced. Would the company even exist without her? For the first time, he wasn't sure. Richard seemed to read his thoughts. The company became successful because of many people. Nathan nodded slowly. But Ava was one of the most important. The words echoed through the room. One of the most important. Not an assistant, not a bystander, not merely a supportive spouse. One of the most important. Nathan leaned back, exhausted, overwhelmed, ashamed. Years of assumptions were collapsing. Years of self-perception were unraveling. And the worst part? The evidence was undeniable. The documents didn't care about pride, didn't care about reputation, didn't care about the story he preferred. The truth existed whether he liked it or not. Richard stood. Before leaving, he placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder. I've known you a long time. Nathan looked up. And? Richard sighed. You're a good businessman. The compliment sounded strange, incomplete. Then Richard added, the question is whether you're ready to become a better man. After that, he walked away, leaving Nathan alone with the files, alone with the evidence, alone with the growing realization that the company anniversary celebration was approaching. And once the documentary team started uncovering these records, the truth might not remain hidden much longer. For the first time in years, Nathan wasn't worried about investors, wasn't worried about media, wasn't worried about business. He was worried about something far more uncomfortable. What would happen when everyone learned the truth? And even more importantly, what would happen when Ava learned that he was only now beginning to understand her value? The answers were coming, faster than he realized. And when they arrived, they would change everything. For weeks after discovering the files, Nathan couldn't stop thinking about them. The documents followed him everywhere, into meetings, onto airplanes, into quiet moments before sleep, even during conversations. No matter how hard he tried to focus on the present, his mind kept drifting back to the past. Back to Ava, back to the sacrifices he had forgotten, back to the uncomfortable realization that his success story wasn't as simple as he once believed. The company anniversary celebration was now less than a month away. Preparations were moving quickly. The documentary team continued collecting material. Editors worked around the clock. Former employees submitted photographs and stories. Everyone wanted to contribute. Everyone wanted to celebrate 20 years of success. Nathan should have been excited. Instead, he felt uneasy. One afternoon, the documentary producer requested a meeting. Nathan entered the conference room, expecting routine updates. The producer smiled. "We found some incredible material." Nathan sat down. "What kind of material?" The producer opened a laptop. Old photographs appeared on the screen. The company's first office. The original employees. Early client meetings. Nathan recognized nearly every image. Then another photograph appeared. Ava, standing beside a whiteboard, reviewing charts, speaking with employees. The producer smiled. "She appears everywhere." Nathan remained silent. The producer continued. "Honestly, we didn't realize how involved she was." Nathan's stomach tightened. Neither did I. The thought remained trapped inside his head. The producer clicked through additional images. More evidence. More examples. More reminders. Every file seemed to reinforce the same truth. Ava had been far more involved than most people realized. Far more involved than Nathan himself had acknowledged. The meeting ended, but the discomfort remained. For the first time, Nathan understood that the upcoming celebration carried risks. Not financial risks. Personal ones. Because the truth was becoming harder to ignore. And once enough people started asking questions, explanations would become unavoidable. A week later, another surprise arrived. The documentary team began interviewing former employees, one by one. Stories started emerging. Stories Nathan had never heard before, or perhaps stories he had forgotten. An editor forwarded several interview transcripts. Nathan reviewed them late one evening. The first interview came from a woman named Karen, one of the company's earliest employees. Karen laughed while remembering the difficult years. "Honestly, there were times we thought the company wouldn't survive." The interviewer asked what changed. Karen answered immediately. "Ava." Nathan frowned. He continued reading. "When everyone else panicked, she stayed calm. She organized meetings. She solved problems. She kept morale up. Half the employees trusted her more than anyone else." Nathan stared at the page. Another interview followed, then another. The pattern repeated. Different people, different memories. The same conclusion. Ava's influence had been enormous, larger than Nathan ever realized. The realization became impossible to escape. One evening, Olivia found him sitting alone in his office. Stacks of documents surrounded him. Photographs covered the desk. She stepped inside. "What are you doing?" Nathan looked up. For a moment, he considered giving a simple answer. Instead, he told the truth. "Learning." Olivia glanced at the files. "About what?" Nathan exhaled slowly. "My past." She sat across from him. For several seconds, she studied the documents. Then she noticed the photographs. Ava appeared in many of them. Working, planning, leading discussions, helping employees. Olivia immediately understood. "The anniversary documentary?" Nathan nodded. Silence followed. Eventually, Olivia spoke. "You seem upset." Nathan laughed softly. "That's one way to describe it. What's another way?" Nathan stared at a photograph of Ava standing beside him during the company's earliest days. The image looked ordinary. Now, it felt significant. Embarrassed. Olivia looked surprised. "Why?" Nathan hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because I'm realizing how much credit I accepted for things I didn't accomplish alone." The confession lingered in the air. Olivia remained quiet, allowing him to continue. Nathan rubbed his forehead. "For years, I described myself as self-made." Olivia nodded. "A lot of people do." But it wasn't true. The words felt strange, heavy, necessary. Olivia leaned back. "What are you going to do?" Nathan didn't have an answer. Not yet. And that uncertainty frightened him. The following week, preparations intensified. The anniversary celebration would attract hundreds of guests. Media outlets planned coverage. Investors planned speeches. Executives planned presentations. Everything pointed toward a major success. Yet beneath the excitement, tension quietly grew. At least for Nathan, because he knew something most attendees did not. The documentary contained information, powerful information, and once it appeared publicly, people would start connecting dots. As the event approached, Nathan began noticing something else. Richard Bennett seemed unusually calm, almost expectant, like a man waiting for something inevitable. One afternoon, Nathan finally confronted him. "You know something?" Richard smiled. "I know many things." "No." Nathan folded his arms. About the anniversary. Richard's expression softened. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered, "The truth has a way of surfacing." Nathan sighed. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need." Nathan looked away, frustrated, because deep down, he knew Richard was right. The truth was surfacing. Slowly, relentlessly. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. Not that he wanted to anymore. The real problem wasn't exposure. The real problem was facing what exposure meant. Because once the truth became public, Nathan would have to confront something he'd avoided for years. The possibility that the woman he once treated as secondary to his success had actually been one of the most important reasons for it. And if that happened, the humiliation wouldn't come from other people. It would come from recognizing how blind he had been. A realization growing closer with every passing day. Closer, and impossible to avoid. The night of the anniversary celebration arrived. For most people attending, it was a night of celebration, a night of recognition, a night of pride. For Nathan, it felt more like a reckoning. The Grand Regency Ballroom had been transformed into a showcase of the company's history. Massive screens displayed photographs from the early years. Display tables featured old business plans, newspaper articles, and company milestones. Guests moved through the room admiring the journey. Employees shared memories. Investors exchanged stories. Laughter filled the air. Everyone seemed excited. Everyone, except Nathan. As he walked through the ballroom, he noticed something immediately. Ava was everywhere. Not physically. In the displays. In the photographs. In the records. The more closely people examined the company's history, the more visible her contributions became. Several guests even commented on it. "I didn't realize your ex-wife was so involved." Nathan forced a smile. Neither did most people. The response felt painfully accurate. Because the person who understood it least had been Nathan himself. The evening officially began at 7 o'clock. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Current employees, former employees, investors, business leaders, members of the media. Even several politicians attended. The event represented 20 years of growth. 20 years of achievement. 20 years of history. Nathan sat at the head table beside Olivia. Across the room, Richard Bennett watched quietly. The older investor seemed unusually thoughtful, almost emotional. Nathan noticed, and for reasons he couldn't explain, that made him nervous. The program began with a documentary presentation. Lights dimmed, conversations stopped, the giant screens illuminated. For the next 20 minutes, the audience watched the company's journey unfold. The earliest years received special attention. The tiny office, the financial struggles, the uncertainty, the risks, the perseverance. As images appeared, Nathan felt increasingly uncomfortable. Not because the documentary was inaccurate, because it was accurate. Painfully accurate. Photograph after photograph showed Ava participating in meetings, reviewing plans, speaking with employees, helping solve problems. The audience noticed. Whispers spread throughout the room. Questions followed. By the time the documentary ended, many guests looked genuinely surprised. The company's history suddenly seemed larger than the version they had always heard. The lights returned. Applause filled the ballroom. Then came the speeches. Several executives spoke first, then investors, then former employees. Everyone shared stories. Everyone celebrated achievements. Everything proceeded smoothly, until Richard Bennett approached the stage. The room immediately grew attentive. Richard was respected, widely respected. When he spoke, people listened. The older investor adjusted the microphone, then smiled. "I've known Nathan Carter for nearly 20 years. Applause followed. Richard waited patiently, then continued. "I've watched this company grow from a dream into an extraordinary success." More applause. Nathan smiled politely. The speech seemed routine, predictable, safe. Then Richard changed direction. "And tonight, I'd like to talk about something history often gets wrong." The room became quieter. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Richard continued. "We love celebrating individual success stories." Several guests nodded. "We love creating heroes." The investor paused, then delivered the sentence that changed everything. "But no great success is built alone." Silence spread across the ballroom. Nathan's heartbeat accelerated. Richard looked directly at him, then toward the audience. "I think tonight is the perfect opportunity to acknowledge someone whose contributions have been overlooked for far too long." The room grew even quieter. Everyone sensed something important was happening. Richard smiled gently. "Ava Mitchell." The name echoed through the ballroom. A wave of surprise moved through the audience. Nathan froze, completely frozen. Richard continued. "I was there during the early years." His voice remained calm, measured, honest. I saw the sacrifices. I saw the ideas. I saw the leadership. I saw the support. And I can say with complete confidence that this company would not exist in its current form without Ava. The statement landed like thunder. The audience reacted immediately. Some looked shocked. Others looked curious. Many looked toward Nathan. Nathan couldn't look anywhere. He simply sat there, listening, feeling years of assumptions crumble. Richard wasn't finished. He described the proposal that secured early funding, the financial risks Ava accepted, the strategic decisions she influenced, the countless moments she stepped forward when the company needed help. Each story added another layer, another piece of evidence, another reminder of how much Nathan had failed to recognize. The audience listened in stunned silence. Then something unexpected happened. Several former employees stood, one by one, sharing their own memories. Karen spoke first, then others followed. Different people, different experiences. The same conclusion. Ava mattered. A lot. Far more than anyone realized, including Nathan. Especially Nathan. The room no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a revelation. The truth wasn't being exposed because someone wanted revenge. Nobody seemed angry. Nobody appeared malicious. People were simply telling the truth. A truth that had remained hidden for years. And that truth was impossible to argue with. The evidence existed. The witnesses existed. The memories existed. Nathan sat silently, listening, reflecting, hurting. Not because people were criticizing him, because they weren't. They were praising Ava, and in doing so, forcing him to confront his own failures. The greatest humiliation wasn't public embarrassment. The greatest humiliation was realizing how much he had taken for granted. Eventually, Richard concluded his speech. His final words lingered long after he stepped away from the microphone. Success becomes meaningful when we honor everyone who helped create it. The ballroom erupted into applause. A standing ovation followed. For Ava, even though she wasn't there, Nathan remained seated, overwhelmed, ashamed, emotional. For the first time in years, he stopped thinking about reputation, stopped thinking about image, stopped thinking about status. Instead, he thought about one thing. Ava sitting at a kitchen table decades earlier, helping him solve problems, believing in him, supporting him, sacrificing for him, all while asking for almost nothing in return. And suddenly, the truth became impossible to ignore. He hadn't lost Ava because she stopped loving him. He lost her because he stopped seeing her. The realization hit harder than any public criticism ever could. Because it was true. Completely true. And for the first time in his life, Nathan wasn't interested in defending himself. He was interested in understanding how he had become the kind of man capable of forgetting the person who helped build everything he valued. A question that would haunt him long after the applause ended, and one that would lead him toward the most important chapter of his life. Not as a businessman, not as a billionaire, as a human being finally learning humility. The applause ended. The guests eventually returned to their conversations. The celebration continued. But for Nathan, the evening was over, at least emotionally. He remained seated long after Richard Bennett left the stage. The ballroom buzzed with energy around him. Yet everything sounded distant, muted, as if he were listening through a wall. For years, Nathan had believed regret came from failure. Failed investments, failed opportunities, failed goals. Tonight taught him otherwise. The deepest regrets often come from success, especially when success forces you to see what you sacrificed along the way. Olivia noticed the change immediately. She placed a hand on his arm. "You okay?" Nathan laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. "No." The honesty surprised both of them. Olivia nodded. She didn't pressure him, didn't try to fix the situation. Instead, she sat quietly beside him, allowing him space. For the first time all evening, Nathan appreciated that about her. She understood when silence was necessary. Eventually, guests approached their table, offering congratulations, discussing the documentary, mentioning Ava again and again. Every conversation seemed to return to the same subject. "I had no idea she was involved like that. She sounds remarkable." Those early stories were incredible. Nathan responded politely, but inside, each comment felt like another reminder. Not because people were wrong, because they were right. And he should have been the first person saying those things years ago. The following morning, Nathan woke earlier than usual. Sleep had been impossible. Memories kept returning. Old conversations, old sacrifices. Moments he hadn't thought about in years. Moments that now felt painfully important. He walked into his office and opened the archive boxes again. This time, he wasn't looking for business records. He was looking for understanding. Hours passed. Photographs covered the desk. Documents filled the room. Nathan studied everything. Every note. Every email. Every proposal. Every forgotten contribution. The deeper he looked, the heavier the regret became. One photograph stopped him completely. It showed Ava sitting beside him at a small folding table. The company's first office. The image wasn't remarkable. No major event had occurred. No important deal had been signed. Yet Nathan couldn't stop staring at it. Because Ava looked happy. Not because of success. Not because of money. Because they were building something together. The realization hurt. Somewhere along the journey, he stopped treating the company as something they built. It became something he built. A subtle shift. A devastating shift. And once that happened, everything else slowly followed. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Richard Bennett entered. Nathan almost laughed. The older investor seemed to appear whenever uncomfortable truths surfaced. Richard glanced around the office. Photographs everywhere. Documents everywhere. Evidence everywhere. "You've been busy." Nathan nodded. "I've been learning." Richard smiled slightly. "Good." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan asked the question that had been haunting him all night. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Richard looked genuinely surprised. "They did." Nathan frowned. "What?" "They told you." The answer confused him. Richard sat down. "Ava told you?" Nathan remained silent. "Not directly," Richard continued. "But she tried." The words landed heavily, because Nathan knew exactly what Richard meant. The conversations, the requests, the concerns, the moments when Ava tried explaining her loneliness, her frustration, her need to feel valued. She had told him. Repeatedly. He simply wasn't listening. Not really. Nathan lowered his eyes. The realization felt unbearable. For years, he blamed busyness, stress, responsibility. Now he understood something uncomfortable. The problem wasn't that nobody warned him. The problem was that he believed he always had more time. Time to listen later. Time to reconnect later. Time to appreciate her later. The flaw in that thinking suddenly seemed obvious. Later eventually runs out. Richard eventually left, but his words remained. The rest of the day passed in quiet reflection. That evening, Olivia found Nathan sitting alone on the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glowed beneath the setting sun. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Olivia sat beside him. "I've been thinking." Nathan looked at her. "About? Us?" The response immediately captured his attention. Olivia stared toward the horizon, then sighed. "We work well together." Nathan nodded slowly. It was true. They did, at least in many ways. But the word lingered. Heavy, necessary. Olivia smiled sadly. There shouldn't always be a but. Nathan felt his chest tighten. Because he understood. For months, perhaps years, both of them had been avoiding the same truth. Their relationship wasn't broken. It simply lacked depth. The connection existed. The partnership existed. The friendship existed. Yet something essential remained missing. Neither wanted to admit it. Now neither could avoid it. Olivia turned toward him. "I think you've spent the last year trying to understand your past." Nathan didn't argue, because she was right. "And I think I've spent the last year pretending that wasn't happening." The honesty hurt, not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. For a long moment, they sat together in silence, watching the city, watching the sunset, watching a chapter of their lives quietly approach its conclusion. Nathan felt sadness, but surprisingly, not panic. Because unlike his marriage with Ava, this wasn't ending because of neglect. It was ending because of honesty. And there was something strangely peaceful about that. For the first time in years, Nathan wasn't running from the truth. He was finally facing it. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Because growth often begins where comfort ends. And Nathan Carter was finally starting to grow. The problem was that growth couldn't erase regret. It couldn't undo lost years. It couldn't change the past. All it could do was change what happened next. The question was whether Nathan had enough courage to take that next step. A step that would eventually lead him back to the one person he needed to speak with most. Ava. 3 weeks after the anniversary celebration, Nathan and Olivia sat across from each other in the same living room where they had hosted countless dinners, celebrations and business gatherings. The penthouse looked exactly the same. Nothing had changed. Yet everything felt different. Sometimes, the biggest changes happen quietly, without arguments, without dramatic confrontations, without anyone raising their voice. This was one of those moments. Olivia folded her hands in her lap. Nathan stared at the city lights beyond the windows. Neither seemed eager to begin the conversation, not because they were angry, because they both knew where it would lead. Finally, Olivia spoke. "I think we've been avoiding this." Nathan nodded. "Yeah." The answer came easier than he expected, perhaps because deep down he had already accepted it. Their marriage wasn't failing. It simply wasn't becoming what either of them hoped it would be. There was a difference, a painful difference. Olivia smiled sadly. "You know what's strange?" Nathan looked at her. "I don't regret meeting you." "Neither do I." The response came immediately, and it was true. Olivia had brought stability into his life during a difficult period. Companionship, understanding, friendship. Their relationship had been real, just not complete. For several moments, silence returned. Then, Olivia asked a question. "Can I be honest?" Nathan laughed softly. "At this point, I'd be disappointed if you weren't." She smiled, then took a deep breath. "I think part of you stopped moving forward a long time ago." The observation hit harder than Nathan expected, because it wasn't about Ava, not directly. It was about him, about the parts of himself he had avoided confronting, the guilt, the regret, the unfinished lessons, the emotional growth he postponed for years. Olivia continued, "I don't think you've been trying to get back to Ava." Nathan listened carefully. "I think you've been trying to understand who you became." The words settled over the room. Quiet, accurate, unavoidable. Because she was right. The anniversary celebration hadn't made him miss Ava. It had made him question himself. Question his choices. Question the story he told himself about success. Most importantly, it had forced him to acknowledge how much of his identity had become tied to achievement, and how little attention he paid to the people helping him achieve it. Olivia stood and walked toward the window. Nathan followed. For several minutes, they looked out across the city together. Then she said something he would never forget. "You spent years building a company." Nathan nodded. "You should spend the next few years building yourself." The statement lingered, simple, wise, necessary. A month later, their divorce was finalized. Unlike Nathan's first divorce, this one unfolded peacefully. There was sadness, disappointment, grief, but no bitterness, no blame, no resentment. Both understood the truth. Sometimes good people simply aren't meant to spend forever together. When the paperwork was completed, Olivia hugged him. A long embrace, the kind shared by people who genuinely wish each other well. Then she smiled. "Take care of yourself." Nathan nodded. "You too." And just like that, another chapter ended. The following weeks felt strangely quiet. For the first time in decades, Nathan lived alone. No meetings filled every evening. No social obligations consumed every weekend. No relationship distracted him from reflection. Just silence. And his own thoughts. At first, the quiet felt uncomfortable. Then it became necessary. Nathan began making changes. Small changes, meaningful changes. He reduced his workload, delegated more responsibility, spent less time chasing new opportunities, more time understanding old mistakes. He also began reconnecting with people, former employees, old friends, individuals who knew him before success changed everything. The conversations proved enlightening. Again and again, people described Ava in similar ways: generous, patient, thoughtful, supportive, remarkable. Each story revealed another piece of the woman he once thought he knew completely, and each story deepened his appreciation. One afternoon, Nathan visited the small neighborhood where he and Ava lived during their early years. The old apartment building still stood. The laundromat remained downstairs. The coffee shop across the street remained open. The sight triggered a flood of memories. Some happy, some painful, all important. As he stood there, he realized something. For years he blamed success for changing his life. Success wasn't the problem. The problem was forgetting the values that existed before success arrived. Gratitude, humility, partnership, appreciation. Those values built the foundation of everything. Without them, achievement felt hollow. The realization brought unexpected clarity. That evening, Nathan returned home and opened an old notebook. Inside were pages filled with goals from his younger years. Business goals, financial goals, personal goals. One entry caught his attention, written nearly 20 years earlier. A simple sentence. "Build a life that makes the people I love proud." Nathan stared at the words, then closed his eyes, because somewhere along the way, he had changed the goal. The focus shifted from building a meaningful life to building an impressive one. And there was a difference. A significant difference. For the first time in years, Nathan felt ready. Not ready to start a relationship, not ready to rewrite history, ready to take responsibility, ready to apologize, ready to acknowledge the truth. The next morning, he made a decision. A simple one, yet perhaps the most difficult decision of his life. He was going to find Ava, not to ask for another chance, not to convince her of anything, not to erase the past. He knew none of that was possible. He simply wanted to tell her something he should have said years earlier. Thank you, and I'm sorry. Nothing more, nothing less. Whether she accepted the apology didn't matter. Whether she forgave him didn't matter. Some truths needed to be spoken, regardless of the outcome. As Nathan picked up his phone and searched for her contact information, his heart raced, not with hope, with humility. Because for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't approaching a situation as a billionaire. He wasn't approaching it as a successful businessman. He was approaching it as a flawed human being, trying to make peace with the consequences of his choices. And although he didn't know it yet, that decision would change both of their lives. Not because it would erase the past, because it would finally allow them to face it honestly. Nathan stared at Ava's phone number for nearly 10 minutes before calling. For a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals and spoken before thousands of people, the task felt surprisingly intimidating. His finger hovered over the screen, then retreated, then hovered again. Finally, he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring tightened the knot in his stomach. Then she answered. Hello? The sound of her voice immediately transported him back through years of memories. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Nathan? He swallowed. Hi, Ava. Silence followed. Not awkward, not hostile, simply unexpected. I wasn't expecting your call. I know. Another pause. Is everything okay? Nathan almost laughed. The question sounded exactly like something Ava would ask. Even after everything, her first instinct remained concern for others. I'm fine. Then he corrected himself. Actually, no. Ava remained quiet, listening, the way she always had. I was wondering if we could talk. The silence returned, longer this time. Nathan prepared himself for rejection, prepared himself for hesitation, prepared himself for discomfort. Instead, Ava answered calmly. Okay. The response surprised him. Okay? A faint smile entered her voice. Yes, Nathan. When? Saturday afternoon. He nodded before realizing she couldn't see him. That works. After ending the call, Nathan sat motionless. His heart raced, not because he expected reconciliation, because he finally had an opportunity to say what needed to be said. The following days passed slowly, very slowly. By Saturday afternoon, Nathan felt more nervous than he had during any business presentation in his life. He arrived 15 minutes early. A small community garden sat beside the neighborhood center where Ava worked. Children played nearby. Volunteers tended flower beds. Families gathered beneath shaded picnic areas. The atmosphere felt peaceful, purposeful, meaningful. Nathan looked around. The place reminded him of Ava, not because it was impressive, because it was impactful. People smiled here. People connected here. People helped one another here. The kind of environment Ava had always loved. A few minutes later, she appeared. Nathan immediately noticed how comfortable she seemed. How confident. How grounded. She wasn't the same woman he divorced years earlier. Then again, neither was he. Ava smiled politely. Hi. Nathan stood. Hi. For a moment, neither knew what to say. Years of history stood between them. Good memories. Painful memories. Lessons. Regrets. Growth. Eventually, Ava gestured toward a nearby bench. Want to sit? Nathan nodded. The conversation began with ordinary topics. Work. Life. Family. Nothing complicated. Nothing emotional. At first, then the silence arrived. The kind of silence that creates space for honesty. Nathan took a deep breath. I owe you an apology. Ava looked down briefly, then back at him. You don't owe me anything. That's not true. The certainty in his voice surprised both of them. For years, Nathan had avoided accountability. Today, he welcomed it. Ava remained quiet, allowing him to continue. Nathan looked toward the community garden, gathering his thoughts. I spent a long time believing my version of the story. Ava said nothing. I convinced myself that success justified everything. The words felt heavy, necessary, painful. I told myself I worked hard. You did. Nathan nodded. I did. Then he continued. But I wasn't the only one. Ava's expression softened, just slightly. Nathan swallowed. The anniversary documentary changed a lot for me. Ava looked surprised. I heard about that. Of course she had. The event received considerable attention. Nathan lowered his eyes. For years I described myself as self-made. Ava smiled sadly. The phrase clearly meant something to both of them. I know. The simple response carried no bitterness, only understanding. And somehow, that made everything harder. Nathan continued. The truth is, I couldn't have built any of it without you. Ava stared at him, silent, listening, the way she always had. Nathan's voice became quieter. You sacrificed your dreams. You supported me. You protected me from problems I didn't even know existed. Emotion tightened his throat. For the first time in years, speaking felt difficult. I accepted credit that belonged to both of us. Ava's eyes glistened slightly. Neither looked away. For several moments, the world seemed to disappear. No children playing nearby, no volunteers working, no traffic in the distance. Just two people confronting the truth. Then Nathan said the words he should have said years earlier. Thank you. Ava closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing the weight of the moment. When she opened them again, tears shimmered softly. Not dramatic tears. Not angry tears. The kind that appear when something long overdue finally arrives. Nathan took a shaky breath, then continued. And I'm sorry. The apology carried years of regret. Years of understanding. Years of lessons learned too late. Or at least what once felt like too late. Ava remained silent for several seconds. Then she smiled gently. Not because the pain disappeared. Because the honesty mattered. It truly mattered. And for the first time since their divorce, Nathan felt something unexpected. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Peace. Because regardless of what happened next, the truth had finally been spoken. The truth both of them deserved. The truth he should have acknowledged long ago. And as they sat together beneath the afternoon sun, neither realized that the most important part of the conversation was still ahead. Because apologies can heal old wounds. But understanding each other's pain, that requires something deeper. And Ava was finally ready to tell her side of the story. For several moments after Nathan apologized, neither spoke. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the community garden. Children laughed in the distance. A light breeze moved through the flowers surrounding the benches. The world continued normally. Yet for Nathan, everything felt different. A burden he had carried for years seemed lighter. Not gone, just lighter. Ava sat quietly beside him. Thoughtful, reflective. Then she finally spoke. You know what hurt the most? Nathan turned toward her. The question immediately tightened his chest. Because after everything he had learned, after all the documents and memories and revelations, he still suspected there were things he didn't understand. Ava looked toward the garden. Not because she wanted to avoid him. Because some truths are easier to share while looking at the horizon. It wasn't the long hours. Nathan listened carefully. It wasn't the missed vacations. She smiled sadly. It wasn't even the cancelled plans. Nathan frowned. Those were the things he had always assumed caused the damage. Apparently, he was wrong. Ava continued. The hardest part was feeling like I was disappearing. The words landed softly, yet they carried enormous weight. Nathan remained silent. You used to ask my opinion about everything. Ava smiled faintly. Business ideas. Future plans. Dreams. Problems. Her eyes drifted toward him. Then one day, you stopped. Nathan felt shame settle over him, because he remembered. Not the exact moment, but the gradual change. The shift from partnership to independence. The shift from we to me. At the time, he barely noticed it happening. Now it seemed painfully obvious. Ava continued. I kept waiting for the old Nathan to come back. Nathan lowered his eyes. I know. No. Ava shook her head gently. I don't think you do. The honesty wasn't cruel. It wasn't intended to hurt. It was simply true. For years, she had waited. Not for perfection. Not for grand gestures. For attention, connection, partnership. The things that once defined their relationship. Nathan looked at her. I'm sorry. Ava smiled softly. I know. The words carried a different meaning now. A deeper meaning. Because she truly believed him. The apology was sincere. Years too late, perhaps. But sincere. And that mattered. For a while, they simply talked. Really talked. Perhaps for the first time in a decade. No distractions. No phones. No meetings. No schedules. Just honesty. They shared memories. Some joyful. Some painful. Some embarrassing. Many surprisingly funny. Hours passed without either noticing. Eventually, Nathan laughed. You know something? What? I forgot how easy it was to talk to you. Ava laughed too. I didn't. The response warmed something inside him. Not romantic hope. something deeper, gratitude. As the afternoon turned into evening, the conversation shifted toward the present. Their current lives, their current goals, their current dreams. Nathan noticed something remarkable. Ava seemed fulfilled, genuinely fulfilled. Not because life was perfect, because it was meaningful. She spoke passionately about community projects, educational programs, families she helped, children she mentored, people whose lives improved because someone cared enough to help. The enthusiasm in her voice reminded Nathan of the woman he met years earlier. The woman who believed success should improve other people's lives, not just her own. Eventually, Ava asked a question. "What about you?" Nathan smiled. "What about me? What do you want now?" The question surprised him, because for most of his life, the answer came easily. More growth, more success, more achievement, more goals. Now? He wasn't sure. Nathan looked across the garden, thinking carefully. Finally, he answered honestly, "I want balance." Ava smiled. The answer seemed to please her. "I think that's the healthiest thing you've ever said." They both laughed. The moment felt light, comfortable, natural, the way old friendships often feel. As evening approached, volunteers began cleaning up. Families started leaving. The garden grew quieter. Nathan realized neither of them seemed eager to end the conversation. A surprising realization, yet a welcome one. Eventually, Ava stood. "I should probably head home." Nathan nodded. "Yeah." Neither moved immediately. Then Ava smiled. "You know, Richard called me after the anniversary." Nathan laughed. "That sounds like Richard. He told me you'd finally started paying attention." Nathan shook his head. "I deserved that." "You absolutely did." They laughed together. The sound felt easy, unforced, real. Before leaving, Ava looked at him thoughtfully. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I'm proud of you." Nathan blinked. The statement caught him completely off guard. "Proud of me?" Ava nodded. "For finally being honest." Emotion tightened his throat again. Not because he wanted praise, because hearing those words from Ava still mattered. More than he expected. More than he wanted to admit. Several seconds passed. Then Nathan smiled. "Thank you." And this time, the gratitude wasn't about business, or success, or sacrifices. It was about growth, mutual growth, the kind that comes from facing uncomfortable truths. As they walked toward the parking lot, neither rushed. Neither forced the future. Neither tried to define what happened next. For the first time in years, they simply enjoyed the moment. Weeks turned into months. Then, months became a year. Nathan and Ava remained in contact. Occasional phone calls became regular conversations. Conversations became lunches. Lunches became dinners. Not because either planned it. Because genuine connection naturally creates its own path. Trust returned slowly, carefully, exactly as it should. Neither ignored the past. Neither pretended old wounds never existed. Instead, they learned from them. Together. One autumn evening, nearly 2 years after their conversation in the garden, Nathan and Ava walked through a neighborhood park. Leaves drifted across the path. The air felt cool, comfortable, peaceful. Nathan glanced toward Ava, then smiled. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "For years, I thought success was about reaching the top." Ava laughed softly. "And now?" Nathan looked around. The quiet park, the simple evening, the woman beside him. Then he answered, "Now I think success is appreciating what matters before it's too late." Ava smiled, the kind of smile that once greeted him every morning. Only now he truly noticed it, truly appreciated it, perhaps for the first time. And as they continued walking beneath the fading sunlight, Nathan understood the lesson that had taken him decades to learn. Money can create comfort. Status can create admiration. Success can create opportunities. But none of those things can replace love built on respect, gratitude, partnership, and appreciation. Those are the things that truly matter. Those are the things worth protecting. And sometimes, if you're willing to learn, grow, and take responsibility, life gives you a second chance to prove you finally understand. And that's where Nathan and Ava's journey comes to an end. A story that reminds us that success means very little if we lose the people who helped us achieve it. Nathan spent years chasing wealth, status, and recognition, only to discover that the most valuable things in life can't be measured by money. Sometimes, the greatest lesson isn't learning how to succeed. It's learning how to appreciate the people standing beside you before it's too late. Now I'd love to hear from you. What was the biggest lesson you learned from Nathan and Ava's story? And tell me honestly, do you believe everyone deserves a second chance after they truly change? Or are some mistakes impossible to repair? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of someone special, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional story filled with love, life lessons, and unforgettable moments. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, remember, never get so busy building a life that you forget to appreciate the people helping you build it. Take care, stay blessed, and I'll see you in the next story.